The narrative of a fascinating story begins with a description of natural beauty. The sun was shining brightly outside, illuminating the green edges of lush trees with its rays. Readers get acquainted with someone's stream of thoughts, according to which the talking character has always been interested in something. He wondered why the main characters of comics and short stories like to choose difficult paths so much. The silhouette of a man with brown tousled hair appeared before the eyes of the audience. He held a sword in his right hand and ran along a bare path in a grove decorated with various flowers and plants. Then the picture allowed us to see his expression a little closer, increasing the angle. The stranger had a sharp nose and a square chin. He had dark eyes that emphasized thin eyebrows. Suddenly, this character stopped and turned his head over his right shoulder, casting a cursory glance somewhere behind his back and opening his mouth without making a sound. According to the narrator, if someone really wanted to take possession of something, then shouldn't he do everything possible to get what he wanted? The man with the sword suddenly rolled on the ground, turning somersaults several times. Although, judging by his facial expressions, the guy did not plan such a maneuver. In the process, he cursed and cursed everything, apparently due to the fact that the foundation was solid, and therefore it was somewhat inconvenient. When suddenly the hero stopped and looked in front of him with a surprised look and, opening his mouth, asked a question. He was interested in what was happening. The man put his right leg on his knee, and on the second he rested his hand, which was free. Then he stood up. As it became known after a short period of time, a silhouette of a mysterious character appeared in front of him, whose face was hidden by the shadow from the hood of a black cloak. Initially, it might have seemed that this hero appeared out of thin air, because he imperceptibly appeared from somewhere above. A guy already known to readers asked why everything was happening like this. It was even possible to trace how the aura thickened around him, acquiring a dark and repulsive shade, and beads of sweat appeared on his face. It was only in the next episode that it finally became clear that this man was angry, because he did not understand why this figure was chasing him. The character shouted at the top of his voice with a demanding tone and gave up his fist, pointing at him. Suddenly, an unfamiliar energy appeared in the space, which had a disgusting black color mixed with red. Some stream of magic of unimaginable power with a purple hue flashed near the left side of the man with the sword, causing him to freeze. He took a step back, thus keeping his balance, and stared at a new kind of danger. In the next episode, the hero grabbed his stomach with his free hand and crouched down, screaming in pain. He did it so unexpectedly that when the sword fell to the ground, small sparks appeared after it. But suddenly a foot in a black boot appeared in front of the guy's nose, which raised dust after itself. The man raised his head and cast a wary glance at his opponent, still barely asking him a question, according to which he wanted to know the reason. Finally, the mysterious character entered into a dialogue. Readers were allowed to see his face up close. However, it was half covered by a black mask, so the story described only his black eyes with pointed eyebrows, which were slightly covered by a grown black bang. The guy looked at his opponent with a menacing look and repeated his question. Suddenly, he grabbed the man by the right hand, in which there was a sword. And he, in turn, did not have time to react and somehow push him away. So all he did was pull away slightly, sitting on the cold ground. He even opened his mouth and silently followed the follower's movements. The man, whose face was hidden by a black mask, was watching the character when blood suddenly appeared. When the mysterious guy threw a harmless opponent, he stood on both legs, spreading his arms in different directions, thus showing that he was holding no cold weapon. And then he became curious, although it might seem that he wanted to make sure that the following judgment was correct. The stranger asked the sitting man about the fact that it was much easier to kill others and take their things. His silhouette was illuminated by the bright sun. As readers might have noticed for themselves, this character was very tall and well built. But in the next episode, they could see around his opponent small drops left after the red liquid. The pursuer strained his eyebrows, which made the expression of his eyes seem very malicious. He was waiting for his interlocutor to say at least one word. That's just that he was not in the mood for a decent dialogue, because the man wanted to be left behind with a demanding tone of voice. Moreover, this ill-mannered hero called the stranger a psycho, arguing that if he was so good, then he should have hunted high-level players. He was bursting with anger because, in his opinion, the mysterious guy clung only to beginners. In the next episode, this man stood up, focusing on his bloody hand. When the pursuer approached the opponent, who was a head shorter than him, he asked him, trying to understand. In fact, he did not understand anything. He grabbed him by the chin, which surprised him, but kept an angry expression on his face. And in the next moment, the aura thickened around the two men, acquiring an ominous dark shade. Readers may have noticed how the secretive guy dealt a crushing blow to the unintelligent interlocutor. But he explained. The hero fell to the ground, picked up small clouds of dust from the ground. As it became known after a short period of time, it was convenient for the pursuer and easier. His tall and muscular figure, which could be seen even through the brown and black uniforms, towered over the dead body of his opponent, which was now hidden by lush bushes. The stranger strained his dark eyebrows, thus emphasizing the eyes, around which there were small wrinkles. He, like a hawk, watched the response of his prey. The story told readers that it was a game with full immersion and virtual reality. It was called August. In the next episode, someone's feet appeared on the horizon, shod in brown boots. That's just when they were confidently walking on the ground, when suddenly they began to rise. However, the picture continued to explain. It was an RPG in a fantasy world. Before the eyes of the audience appeared a tall castle made of white stone, the facade of which was decorated with tall trees and bushes, which from afar, as it might seem, were blue and purple. This building was located on a high cliff, from which a rather large waterfall descended. He was being watched by an already well-known stalker in a dark cloak. As it turned out, this game was famous for complete freedom of action and a huge world. Of course, such a diamond instantly attracted the attention of many gamers. In the next episode, readers were shown a place that looked like a market or a meeting for knights. Each of them had their own equipment. Someone even moved on unusual animals similar to turtles. Today it is the #1 game with tens of millions of users. She was the best in the whole wide world. The story once again focused readers' attention on a mysterious man in a black hood and mask. He watched closely as his rival disappeared, whose immobilized body began to turn into blue pixels. And in the next episode, it could have been noticed how 2 tables appeared in front of the stranger's face, whose edges seemed to be decorated with red lace. The guy looked at them and relaxed his facial expressions. As it turned out, he was surprised to some extent, because the man, just like the audience, did not know what kind of window it was. According to one of them, the character killed the user, which increased the level of notoriety, which now numbered 1,000,001. The number of his points exceeded 1,000,000, which meant that the level was huge. But, based on the other, the player was informed that he was awarded. The man received the worst criminal award. When he saw the last message, he took off his black mask out of surprise, thus revealing a full view of his face. A guy with a furious tone of voice shouted, cursing at the same time about what he had done to deserve the title of being called the worst, arguing his behavior by the fact that he had knocked out not so many players. And the next moment, O paused a little and looked down, thinking. After a short period of time, he made the assumption that there were a maximum of 100,000. But he did not stop at this number, because now it seemed to him that there were more of them. The character held his chin with his left hand and gave himself up to his thoughts, lowering the second limb to the belt. As it turned out, this man has been fighting with many people for 2 years. In the next episode, he pulled a slight grin and said out loud that he needed to look at his achievements. Releasing the steam of air, the hero saw in front of him a sign of dark red with a hint of black, on which the text was written. According to him, the achievement of the worst criminal added 100% to the damage when attacking a person. Moreover, its bearer was now considered the person in whose world the most murders were, and his name was now known throughout the continent. And also a man will be feared by all races, and people will shake at the mention of his name alone. That's just, apparently, he didn't care at all, because he found it not bad that his new status doubled his damage to people. And in his thoughts he was thinking about the fact that the witness was not nearby, and that guy was in battle, so he would not be able to take a screenshot. In his opinion, it was perfect. The character said out loud that now he needed to clean up his tracks in that place and leave as soon as possible. He glanced at the small tablets that were floating in the air and noticed that a detection skill had been activated. As it turned out, a person was found within a radius of 50 meters. The mysterious man in the black hood ran away because he made the assumption that it was a suspicious coincidence that arose at the wrong time. The next moment, the thought occurred to him that it was a bounty hunter. The guy disappeared behind a tree, pulling a victorious smile as if he had caught someone red-handed. The player decided that for now he needed to hide somewhere. Suddenly, somewhere in the depths of the grove, a tall black silhouette appeared. In the next episode, readers could see him a little closer. It was a man in a black kimono, with a long sword hanging on his left side. Above his head, you could see the inscription, Goovy. What attracted the attention of the main character, because he was surprised by a rather strange name. This character with short dark hair had a sharp chin and a frowning expression. He looked somewhere to the right side, and then returned his gaze forward. At this moment, the man continued to study the player who suddenly appeared, wondering in his head why he did not have a rank. Moreover, he concluded that he had fabric armor, and the sword, whose end went behind his back, looked cheap. According to the pursuer, all his equipment was unpretentious. Suddenly, readers could notice how Goofy turned his body in the direction of the tree, behind which the dim silhouette of the main character was hiding, who summed up his study by saying that the guy smelled of poverty. That's just the faded figure of a man in a black raincoat turned around, turning his head over his left shoulder. As it became known after a short period of time, he decided to hunt someone else. The character pulled his hood lower and with a calm measured step rushed in the opposite direction from the new hero. He argued his behavior by saying that it was time to finally find another prey. However, suddenly someone's words were heard, according to which the burning man found something or someone. The guy in the black hood stopped, somewhat surprised. Suddenly, he unfolded his body, which became visible in an instant. The main character grabbed his sword and stood in an attacking pose, simultaneously reflecting on how he was noticed. By making a swinging motion with a cold weapon, the man provoked the appearance of a stream of air, because of which his cloak fluttered. A mysterious character entered the battle, whom the main character took to a beggar. He also grabbed his sword, stabbing it and stepping back. As it turned out, he fell on the weapon of the guy in the black hood. His sword broke in two. Moreover, according to the following episode, the character was injured. He knelt down, throwing everything out of his hands. Mentally, he reflected on the fact that this could not be true. And after a short period of time, the main character fell face down. Readers may have noticed how the earth began to turn red. The man's eyes began to close from impotence, and the last thing he saw was the figure of a mysterious character in a faithful kimono. In his head, the main character put a brand on the weakling, because of which he was injured. Suddenly, a window with an inscription appeared in space, according to which the guy died. As it turned out, due to the fact that the man had a high level of notoriety, his killer will not be punished in the future. The system informed him that he was the worst criminal in history, and as a punishment for death, he would not be allowed to enter the game for the next 24 hours. The main character will be imprisoned in the Great Clock Prison. After some time, the story developed inside a bright office, in the center of which there was a round table surrounded by 4 chairs. There were doors with numbers on the walls of this room. Suddenly one of them, number 3, was opened by a man with dark hair. He swore at the top of his voice and began to leave the enclosed space in which the computer and the chair were located. This character grabbed his head with his right hand, pulling his lush hair. As it turned out, murderers with a high level of notoriety often became victims of more serious punishments. As an example, the picture cited a man in a black raincoat who had 1,000,000 points of notoriety. Moreover, when someone died in the game, his level dropped, and all the items that were in the inventory dropped out. The main character thought to himself, trying to verify the truthfulness of the statement according to which he died. And he didn't like it. In the new episode, the character stepped on his eyebrows, which made his expression more serious. He was holding a blue iron jar in his right hand, from which he took a sip the next moment. As the guy put it out loud, as soon as he remembered about it, he immediately became angry and annoyed. Suddenly he handed over the jar, which caused liquid to pour out of it. The man wanted to know who the person who dared to do this to him was. According to the main character, for the simple and obvious reason that he was the worst criminal in the world, he will have to bear a rather serious punishment. He put his left hand in his pocket, and with his right he threw the cereal jar into the trash can. The character decided to make an attempt to enter the game a little later to see how things would be. He rested his chin on his fist and looked up. However, in the next episode, the guy was behind bars. He was wearing a long white shirt with black pants. He held onto the handrails and stared ahead, suddenly surprised. It was a great 1-hour prison. The top of a 100-meter mountain. A huge hill appeared before the eyes of readers, on which there was some kind of castle. The space had a dark shade, from which goosebumps ran. The system notified the main character that his crimes were so numerous that no list was enough for them. Moreover, the Ruin Empire had stripped him of his rights, and there was no trial for the simple and obvious reason that the character was a successful criminal. And based on the next window, the Empire sentenced him to life in prison. The story continues its rapid development. This time, the narrative describes how the game system notified the main character that the Empire had sentenced him to life in prison. From this shock thought, the man's face became puzzled. He looked up and opened his mouth, not making a sound and still holding on to the 2 handrails. The next moment, the guy suddenly started laughing. That's just it wasn't out of happiness, but out of despair. The main character began to knock loudly, demanding in such a way that he was at least given a trial and quickly sentenced. Because, in his opinion, it was far from funny. Now his expression became angry. The player strained his eyebrows and closed his jaws, baring his snow-white teeth. But suddenly something caught his attention. The guy took his right hand to the side, carefully watching her. And then he did the same with the left, watching the same questioningly. In the next episode, the main character looked at his body with a surprised look, at the same time cursing at the top of his voice. He raised his right leg and asked the question as if he wasn't alone. The man was interested in why he was dressed this way. Instantly the main character, taken aback, because some crazy thought was born in his head. He definitely did not like the current situation. A window of red mixed with black hung in space, in which there were dark green cells. It was inventory. The guy brought his index finger closer to it and began leafing through it. As it turned out, the list was completely empty. The system informed him that the player was currently serving a prison sentence, which meant that all his items had been confiscated. Moreover, even worse, the skills of the main character were also blocked, and the levels were lowered. From such negative information for the character, he screamed at the top of his voice, cursing everyone who allowed it. Being behind the prison, the men pondered what he had to do now. The picture took him in close-up, revealing a view of the guard standing next to him, who all this time heard his indignation that there were things that could and could not be touched. The guard touched his left ear and asked the void out loud, wondering why the prisoner was shouting so much, when suddenly the main character fell to the floor, uttering the last cursing word. In his head, he sent this game into the abyss, referring to the fact that it was definitely some kind of bug. He said out loud that he should have quit the game, since it was so disgusting. The guy put his right hand on his leg, leaning on the other, when suddenly he noticed something. The main character turned his head to the left and looked down. As it turned out, there was a white bone lying next to him. He pushed her away, asking a question, according to which the guy was curious about what it was. The bone flew quite far away and hit some black silhouette, which, in fact, the main character noticed. He got up on both feet, keeping his balance, and cast a surprised glance in that direction. As it turned out, the man saw a skeleton, the reason for which he thought. Suddenly, the character noticed a brown bundle that was locked in his jaw. The main character came closer and grabbed him, pulling him out. In the next episode, the system informed him that the man had found the trace of the king for the first time. As it turned out, it was the first time he had encountered his will. The guy unfolded the paper and began to reason over what was written in it. A new sign hung in space, which was ominously purple in color, with words written on it, according to which someone was used to being worse than others. In his glory years, he was the Lord of Shadows and the rulers of the Valley of Darkness. This character was the king of all criminals. That's just the main character is not interested. He closed his eyes and said out loud that he understood the hint and wanted to skip the introduction. But the narrative continued. It described how the stranger became a problem for the heroes of the 10 kingdoms and continents. They were probably jealous of how many treasures he had. And for this simple and obvious reason, he was declared the worst of evils. Then the hunt for his head began. The main character glanced at the skeleton and the cloak and made the assumption out loud that he was offended and robbed by these heroes of the 10 kingdoms. After all, there was so much bragging in him, and he himself was robbed. Except the Shadow King paid them back in kind. The man didn't understand what this meant, but the next moment he exclaimed that he didn't care, referring to the fact that at first it was pretty good, and then it got boring. He put his right hand on his side and made a swing with his left. When the guy turned his back to the skeleton in a black robe and expressed his opinion that, in his opinion, the will of the king was nonsense, a bright blue glow appeared behind him. This made him turn his whole body around and look at what was happening in his dungeon. Readers may have noticed a bundle floating in space. According to him, one day the heir of the Shadow King was supposed to appear, who would shake their world and destroy everyone. He would steal everything that belonged to them. That's just the main character. This whole situation seemed annoying and intrusive. The piece of paper continued to be in the air. Bright light energy emanated from it. The system again notified the character that the king of the Valley of Darkness, who was unjustly condemned and condemned to death, was waiting for someone who would avenge his pain. At this moment, readers could notice how a dark aura thickened around the skeleton, which had a repulsive purple hue. In his last moments, the king sealed a special power and the protagonist was suitable for it. The system asked the character if he agreed to accept the will, provided that the levels, skills, and points would be reset. The man stared at this sign for some time in bewilderment and wondered how he should act, and in general react to it. After much thought, the guy was inspired. He covered his open mouth with joy. A radiant aura appeared around him, as if he had just received something special or precious. The main character asked the void, trying to make sure that he had just come across some hidden quest. After all, based on his next remark, he agreed to everything. When the guy brought the index finger of his right hand to the yes button, a thought suddenly occurred to him. The man was taken aback and instantly began to look upset. He looked to the right, as if he wanted to ignore the dark red window. Then he turned to the bars and began to think about something. As it turned out, the case was as follows. The character made it clear at the top of his voice that it looked very mean from the side of life. Suddenly, he fell to his knees, hitting himself hard. Although, apparently, the man did not notice it, because he was busy with something else. The main character was so deeply saddened that an aura thickened around him, acquiring a mysterious dark shade. In the next episode, it was as if tears were streaming down his face, or he was only pretending and acting, trying to find out something in this way. The guy shouted at the top of his voice that he couldn't get out of there even if he had to agree to the quest. The picture continued the rapid development of mysterious events. At this moment, the main character was sitting in a bright room with computers. He was at a round table, occupying one of the chairs. When the story zoomed in on him, readers could see how the character was holding a black smartphone in his hand and looked somehow wary, so much so that a drop of sweat appeared on his right cheek. As it turned out, the thing was that there was no information regarding the character king of the gloomy valley. The man found a secret quest for the first time. Only he was interested in what reason right now. The guy closed his eyes and leaned on his right hand, slightly pulling his dark hair. He indulged in his thoughts, according to which all the items were taken away from him, as well as the skills were unavailable. He leaned on the back of the computer chair, his hands on his knees, and took a deep breath, relaxing slightly in this way. In his opinion, it was terrible, because the guy even asked himself if he should have just given up. In his head, he recreated the episodes when his character stood in front of this mysterious dark red tablet with an offer to accept the will of the king of the valley. But if you think about it, then in the additional information to it, it was written that all stats will be reset. The main character was thinking about the fact that if he still accepts the quest, and all the characteristics are reset, then. That's just he didn't let readers know the end of his conclusion. The man crossed both arms over his chest and tensed his eyebrows, as if he was solving a complex mathematical problem. The next moment, the character identified something. He arched his thin eyebrows, making it seem that his eyes were burning brightly from some idea. The guy scratched his chin with his right hand and aloud made it clear to the audience that he should try. In the next episode, the story describes the actions that took place in a place where there were a lot of characters dressed in colorful gear. Everyone went about their own business, not paying attention to others. How suddenly readers could notice how someone defiantly took a step and stopped. His feet were hidden behind low brown ankle boots and with a pointed nose. As it became known after a short period of time, it was the main character. He stood in the middle of the square and, with both arms outstretched in different directions, shouted with joy that he had finally managed to do something. In the next episode, the game again focused readers' attention on a red and black tinged sign with an inscription, according to which the character was recreated. The audience was allowed to see a tall man in a black hood, whose face was half hidden by a dark cloth. This player had level 99 and pretty good equipment, which made him have a bright aura of radiance around him, as if he was some kind of diamond. And then history compared it with the current version. This character had the first level. He was wearing a white shirt on his body, but there was a kind of self-confident smile on his face, as if the man was up to something, or he was sure that something cool was waiting for him. The system notified both him and the readers that if the character in Agatha returned to the first level, then he had only two options. According to one of them, it was possible to continue from the place where he died. And based on the second, the player was allowed to return to the starting village. Suddenly, the main character raised his right hand up, directing a concentrated look at it, and announced a restart. The story described how white circles with seals formed around his brush, around which there was a bright blue glow. As it turned out, he was trying to get into the starting village. In the next episode, the man did it at all in his dungeon. Readers could notice how his whole body was enveloped in a bright blue light, which only grew. History has ruled that he chose the latter option. That's just, according to the main character, it might seem like a waste of restarting, but it took time to adapt to the new character. He looked in front of him, at the place where there were two guards dressed exactly the same. They even had about the same height. Readers may have noticed how the character was wary to some extent. The reason was that the elephants of the guard were moving in his direction. The guy exhaled in surprise, mentally asking himself why they were coming to him. Out of surprise, he covered his chin with his right hand, as if this was how the man felt safe, and waved his left. And in the next episode, the audience finally became convinced that the main character had done something illegal. He escaped from prison, and such a strange reaction followed because he had a terrible task. Readers could see how his expression changed every second. Now the guy closed his eyes and strained his thin eyebrows, covering the lower part with his palm. Only 2 guards walked past him, which surprised him to some extent. He turned back and looked at the 2 people walking away, watching them with a questioning expression on his face. Aloud, the character summed up that they ignored him, although his tone was like a shrewd one, as if the man wanted to make sure that what he saw was true. The next moment, he made the assumption that it was some other bug. A memory appeared in his head, according to which members of the guard always rushed at him with swords as soon as the main character appeared in the city. All he said out loud was that a window of characteristics had popped up in front of his face. According to him, the character's name was Luke. He had the 1st level, but this did not prevent him from carrying the status of the worst criminal, with the work of the best thief. Based on what was written at the bottom of the scoreboard, the man had an updated notoriety, which, by the way, surprised him to some extent. And after a short period of time, the main character's attention was attracted by a phrase that explained that a fake identity hid his evil deeds, but the punishment was still in effect. In his head, the guy summed up that now he would have to hide. Luke opened his mouth in confusion and waved his hands involuntarily, saying out loud that it was as if someone was making fun of him. Mentally, he explained to the readers that she was passive, so there had to be some skills. The man exclaimed in a demanding tone of voice so that the system would show him a window of skills, which, in fact, happened after a short period of time. The guy put his index finger to the button and said out loud with interest that he should have watched while singing some strange song. According to the new information, the passive skill was a fake identity that hid the evil deeds of the protagonist, but only the punishment was still in effect. But if we talk about an active skill, then it was a search of the 1st level. The guy was told that he should study things that could be stolen from the intended target, but on condition that the distance would be small. Moreover, the use of the skill will be impossible if the man saw the target, but if he moves away from her or stops looking at her, that the search will be interrupted. Another active skill was stealing, also of the 1st level. According to the window, the character could steal the items he found during the search. After each unsuccessful theft, the probability of success will, unfortunately, fall. And if the probability drops to 0%, the victim will notice it and take it for an attack. Such information caught the main character by surprise, because he was silent for a while, and reread the information, thinking about something in this way. He scratched his cheek and strained his eyebrows, making his gaze seem focused. In his head, the guy was taken aback and began to look out of one window, then into another, thinking that king of the valley was a very ordinary thief. When the red and black tinged scoreboard began to disappear, turning into large pixels, the main character looked away from them and looked up from dissatisfaction, because he just couldn't believe it, making the assumption the next moment that he should test his new abilities. When suddenly the story described a mysterious red flame that appeared around his eyes, painted them in the same color. It became known that it was a search skill. Readers were allowed to see how a black sign appeared around the other heroes who were on the square, which indicated what the guy was doing at that moment. In the next second, he noticed for himself that it worked not only for players, but also for NPCs. The man looked at the new window, according to which he had to choose a target. The main character turned his head over his left shoulder and looked at a character in black and red gear with very curly blonde hair, who was talking to a player in a black robe. His face was hidden. Pulling an evil smile from ear to ear, the man made a firm decision that he would fit. In the next episode, whistling slightly and putting both hands behind his back, he walked past 2 other young people who were animatedly having a dialogue about something. The system showed readers that the target had been selected. The search of the user under the name of Seng Galchai began, and the main character was convinced of how it worked. When the scoreboard in red with a black tint showed the guy that the objects of the goal were stealing a rabbit, bandages and glass beads, the man exclaimed joyfully that he liked it very much, because he was even allowed to inspect the inventory. In his opinion, it was a great ability. He forced a smile again, only now it revealed a view of his snow-white teeth. The guy looked at the other 2 people, folding both hands on his chest, as if he had accidentally noticed them. But the search was interrupted for the simple and well-known reason that the distance to the target was too large. And in the next episode, readers finally managed to find out the name of the main character, because Yu Seok-woo was setting himself up not to get upset. The picture described how his red eyes again began to blaze with a mysterious fire, which meant that he again began to try his new abilities. Mentally, he came to the conclusion that he had many more targets that he would like to try to search. It began to get light outside. The blue clear sky acquired bright orange and pink colors, but the main character was still in the square. He was the only one. The guy walked confidently under the tall houses and pondered. According to one of his thoughts, the man was firmly convinced that he would hit someone, so he had to keep an eye on everything. And the reason was that the chance of a successful theft depended on it. Yu Xiaoku was turning his head in different directions when suddenly something caught his attention. As it turned out, the case consisted in a large physique of a man who was sleeping right on the street, with his back against a stone wall, and his legs spread out in different directions, thus maintaining balance. Apparently, this character was a cook, because he wore a white uniform with a cap. The main character looked at him and stopped, covering his mouth with his hand, because he was stretched with joy and anticipation. In his head, the guy thought that he had to steal from someone who probably wouldn't notice it, and the sleeping stranger will be the first victim. Yu Xiaoku stretched out his left hand in the direction of the player, which caused a mysterious red glow in the form of smoke to appear around it. As it turned out, this is how the search of the target began. That's just, he turned out to be not a user, but an NPC resident. The system board showed the main character that the stranger had a rusty dagger, which greatly pleased the guy who exclaimed mentally about it. The following episode describes how the man's right hand was covered with an intimidating blue aura with a red tint mixed with black. The main character pulled a victorious smile from ear to ear, baring his snow-white teeth. So the theft ability was activated, and in the new scoreboard it was indicated that it had begun. The story tells readers about how Yu Xiaoku grabbed a cold rusty weapon, just stretching out his right hand through a red window that looked like a portal. In the new chapter, the audience became aware, based on the black table, that the theft had begun. The main character stretched out his right hand, which seemed to disappear into the portal, and grabbed a rusty dagger. When he was convinced that he was real, the guy opened his mouth for joy, without uttering a word out loud. His eyebrows were tense, which made his gaze seem somewhat insidious. The new ability worked. A new red window with a dark shade appeared in front of Yu Xiaoku's face, according to which the theft was committed successfully because the man received a rusty dagger. The more experience and skill level he has grown, as well as the level of notoriety. In his thoughts, the main character considered successful the fact that he managed to get experience points. After all, if this continues, that man will be pumped much faster than last time. He concluded to himself that he should have stolen only in dullards. Yu Xiaoku turned his back on his recent goal and walked away from him. A new thought rang in his head, according to which he was deciding who should be cleaned next in line. When suddenly his thoughts were interrupted. A stranger in the square was surprised that his interlocutor had a high-level item. However, the bald man showed him, presenting his index finger to his mouth, that he should behave quietly. His buddy thought it was pretty cool, and so he exclaimed that he was jealous. The main character stopped at this time and turned his head slightly, glancing at the talking players. At the next moment, the guy had a question in his head. He was wondering if what he had heard regarding the player having a high-level item was really true. But his face reflected a satisfied smile from ear to ear, as if he had already made a decision a long time ago. As it turned out, in August, all subjects were divided into several categories. Some were considered ordinary. After them came rare, unique, heroic ones, and finally, legendary artifacts. However, readers have learned that only one such item has now been found. Even if the quality was only one step higher than usual, then often such things had interesting buffs that could be useful until the character becomes a high-level player. And if the item had some special characteristic, then it could be sold very expensively. Yu Xiaoku looked at the other man and reflected on the fact that he had managed to get a powerful item and brought it to the starting village. At the next moment, the guy made a firm decision that he would be his next victim. The story began with the story of how the main character confidently walked behind a new goal, removing both hands behind his back. He was so close to them that he could hear their conversation, according to which a friend asked the guy if he would use it himself or sell it. To which the man, in turn, made it clear that first he would find out the value of the item, and only then he would think what to do with it. In Yu Xiaoku's mind, a thought was heard, according to which his new target should always remain alert, because otherwise, such as the main character, there would be a chance of theft. The story describes that the square again became filled with people who were lining up at some stall. From the ballet, one could hear a conversation between his master and a friend and a magician. The first one said that he would give 2 silver coins for the object he was holding in his hand, but his interlocutor was dissatisfied, and therefore he offered 5. One of the 2 characters was surprised at how long the queue was, to which he heard the answer that they could not do something about it, and they would have to wait. The main character mentally came to the conclusion that this was his chance. He tensed his eyebrows, which made his face look more intimidating, as if he was planning something bad. In the next moment, his eyes were covered with a scarlet flame, and his teeth bared in a contented mood. The search of the target has begun. That's just the system opened a red window with a dark shade, which told that the prey had only useless junk, bandages, and broken swords. Yu Seok-woo cursed inwardly because he didn't expect that there would be so many useless items. According to another scoreboard, the character had a snail shell, beautiful pebbles, and barley bread. After that, the main character already doubted that the player had anything high level at all, when suddenly the window, after showing a hood, a bitten apple, and a piece of glass, attracted attention to an unidentified object. There was a bright green glow around this inscription, as if it was special. In his head, the guy exclaimed that this was it. That's just the item could not be stolen, which somewhat puzzled the man who was interested in what the reason was. According to the recognition, some items could not be stolen until they were identified. This meant that first, it was necessary to carry out recognition. At this moment, the stall owner exclaimed that the next one would come, thus interrupting him from his thoughts. Yu Seok-woo cursed to himself when he heard this, and turned out to set himself up on a positive wave. Because he simply could not give up, so he decided to at least try. The guy raised his left hand and opened his mouth without making a sound. Suddenly, a bright red glow appeared from his palm. As it turned out, it was a recognition ability. In the next episode, readers will follow the progress of this force, which now totaled as much as 14%. And after a short period of time he became 46. The main character exclaimed joyfully that everything worked out, because the number continued to grow. Moreover, it's almost over and there's not much left. Viewers could notice how the character even folded his hands into fists in amazement, because the mark reached 72%. At this very moment, the stall owner stretched out his right hand in a gesture so that both men would show their magic item to him so that he could examine it and estimate the price. The first guy replied to his interlocutor, holding a bag of money that he had finished, and asked him to evaluate his subject, to which he gave a positive answer. However, such a rush on the part of strangers did not please the main character at all, because he mentally asked the system to work faster. Suddenly everything was ready. Recognition was successful. There was even a small drop of sweat on Yu Seok-woo's face, for the simple and obvious reason that he managed to identify the item. His right hand continued to pulse and emit a dark blue light with a red tinge. This meant that the theft ability was activated. When the bald character put down his bag and said, after greeting at the same time, that he needed to evaluate something, he received a question from a member of the staff, according to which he wanted to know if it was a special item. That's just something like surprise appeared on his face, because he didn't know where this thing had gone. Suddenly, the stall owner asked if he really had nothing, so he asked the next one to come up. However, the main character unexpectedly entered the dialogue, who was playing his game. He pointedly stabbed a bald man with a bag in the shoulder and asked him if he would stick around in this place until tomorrow, and make honest people wait in this way, so he asked him to move away. The stranger turned his head over his right shoulder and looked at Yu Seok-woo, whose face was showing something like anger. That's just a character who had a special subject. He really wanted to object, but he was interrupted again by the main character, rude to him why he just kept silent. When the guy approached the stall owner, he handed him his edged weapon, which he had stolen some time ago, and said he wanted to sell it. His interlocutor pointedly chuckled, as if he was thinking about something, and summed up aloud that it was a rusty dagger. He began to examine it. But the picture in the next episode focused readers' attention on two men, one of whom was trying to support the second. The character made the assumption that his special item disappeared due to a bug in the game, so he decided to file a complaint. A bald guy with a drooping expression walked next to him and asked aloud if he would be returned a valuable thing. The story described to the audience how Yu Seok-woo was moving, happily turning his head in different directions. He was somewhere between the houses, because there were only brick walls around him. In the new episode, he asked himself a question. The guy wondered if he could now check his new find. A black plaque with the name of the inventory appeared in front of his face, which was covered with sweat from nerves and worries. That's what he clicked on. After a short, and even instantaneous, period of time, the entire space around the main character began to glow green, which made him alert and closely monitor the system window. The next moment, someone opened an orange soda can. It was Yu Seok-woo. The man gave himself up to his thoughts. As it turned out, he was amazed by the fact that he could not get this item after so many murders, but now it finally got into his hands. A satisfied grin appeared on the character's face. The story told readers that the Wind Bracelet was a mysterious and special object. A golden exhibit with various patterns appeared before the eyes of readers. According to the following episodes, it was a special item with a speed buff. Attack speed, to be more precise. For example, the description is conducted around the silhouette of a player who, using his sword with a black aura, provoked the appearance of a blue stream of energy, and also dexterity, so that the same user could do different flips and turns. It became known that all the characteristics associated with speed were increasing. There were no restrictions on the Wind Bracelet, so anyone could use such an item. It was for this simple and obvious reason that it cost a lot. The next moment, Yu Seok-woo closed his eyes and began to dream, at the same time indulging in his thoughts, which continued to fill his head. The guy made a bold assumption that perhaps his fate was the fact that he needed to become a great thief. A bright golden glow appeared around him after this remark. However, he still wanted to know the remote cost of the bracelet. The main character quickly darted towards the chair and the computer, which he instantly forced to turn on. According to this subject, there has been an interesting rumor going around among high-level players lately. As it turned out, the man was watching a live broadcast. In it, a girl with short hair and a man were having a dialogue. The heroine asked her interlocutor if he knew what was happening in the game. He, in turn, gave a positive answer. He said that there was talk that some newcomer was hunting for the first in the ranking, to which Yu Seok-woo said that someone was imitating him. He smiled, grinned, and began to listen further. The girl asked a question. She wondered if it wasn't Luke, the worst killer in history, who was doing this. In her opinion, it was just a coincidence, because thanks to one of the players, they recognized the hunter's appearance. The guy and the girl made an offer to take a closer look at him. It was the same character who killed the main character in the game, to which, of course, he objected. The moments when the guy was hunting for him, before delivering a crushing blow, popped up in his head. From just this thought, Yu Seok-woo became embittered. He slammed his left hand menacingly on the table and thought that he would never forget his face. The story began the narrative around a rather strange conversation. Someone said that 6 had already fallen, and they had 8 more to deal with. Moreover, in their opinion, it was to some extent a difficult situation. As it turned out, the action developed the reader's interest regarding the 10th meeting of the heads of the best guild of August. A huge round table with several high-backed chairs appeared before their eyes. They were occupied by mysterious black silhouettes. Someone from the circle asked a question out loud, according to which the player had a desire to find out where this goovy came from. He pointedly tapped his index finger on the table, as if it hurt him. His neighbor replied that he had tried to find out, but so far he had not managed to dig up information that would be worth something. The third one laughed at all, because, in his opinion, it was about an unofficially high-level guy. The fourth silhouette adjusted his hood and wondered why he appeared at that moment. The next stranger summed up that they needed to deal with him as quickly as possible. But, as the sixth objected, they didn't even know how to catch him. Someone made a verdict, according to which this mysterious but rather strong player looked like Luke, which greatly surprised everyone present, because readers could see their astonished eyes, even though they were hidden by a black mantle. Some embittered character from the circle asked the speaker a question. He asked why he even dared to remember the name of someone so greedy, and the other picked up his mood and said out loud that he felt sick at the very thought. Suddenly, the story decided to remind the audience what this hatch looked like. Around the main character, dressed in black equipment, there was a red energy that repelled. 4 men, heads of different guilds. Compared to him, Gooby was a real angel. Suddenly, someone raised a hand in a gesture for the others to stop arguing and calm down. He objected, wondering if it was time to think about how to get rid of the arrogant player. The story showed readers his face. He had dark eyes and slightly overgrown hair that covered his high forehead. The guy folded his hands and put his head on them, watching the reaction of his comrades. As it became known based on the new episode, it was the head of the Goblin Guild. His name was Racino. In his opinion, each of them had to try for the sake of a great cause. Then the action again unfolds around the square, which was filled with warriors dressed in different equipment. At this moment, the main character indulged in his thoughts. According to his thoughts, the guy was firmly convinced that he had felt something strange even then. Yu Seok-woo remembered Goovy's face and wondered how he didn't understand how he dared to kill him, a high-level player, and even in such a cheap outfit. Then he turned his head over his right shoulder and looked with a menacing expression at the 2 men who were standing and talking in that direction. According to the man, it will take him some time to regain his former strength, but one day he will definitely do it. In the next episode, readers could notice how his right hand shone blue with purple and red tints. This mysterious and sinister energy was drawn to the 2 strangers who were engaged in conversation. And then the audience was allowed to see how the eyes of the main character were covered with red flames. His gaze was focused on finding interesting things that he could steal. As it turned out, Yu Seok-woo still took the items, and the dark window of the system notified the man that the theft was successful, which is why he had increased experience and skill level, and even the level of notoriety. When the guy looked at this, his expression became somewhat upset and even wary. The weather was sunny, so Yu Seok-woo calmly strolled through the quiet, untidy streets and enjoyed his day. Suddenly, he opened the stats window by tapping on it with his right index finger. In the next episode, the story informed readers that Luke had risen to the 4th level, which greatly pleased him. He could not have imagined that he would be able to reach it in 2 days. After all, at this rate, he will be able to reach the 10th in just a week. Suddenly someone interrupted him, calling him a friend and apologizing. The man turned his head in the direction from which the noise was coming. As it turned out, 2 men with insidious smiles approached Yu Seok-woo. The first of them, a tall man with 2 large scars on his face, asked him to give them just a minute. And the second, bald and shorter, raised up the index finger of his right hand and picked up the remark of his friend, adding that wasn't the main character supposed to answer when someone from the elders spoke to him. In his head, the guy compared them to unintelligent life forms. The second man turned to his friend and let him know that he had scared this boy, who at that time scratched his temple and looked at them in bewilderment. And the first one made it clear to him not to be afraid, because they were good guys, but they had a difficult situation. After this phrase, the player with 2 huge scars on his face took out his sword and began to threaten Luke by asking him a question. It became known to readers that he was interested in whether the main character would unite with them. However, the latter, in turn, silently turned around and, in a gesture that he did not really want, began to walk with both hands in his pockets. Suddenly, something caught his attention. Yu Seok-woo looked up at the blackboard with red edges that appeared, according to which the guy could accept an unexpected quest. After a short period of time, it became known that according to the task, the man had to clear the village of evil. The difficulty level was normal, but the bandits, who usually hid in the alleys, wanted to get into a fight with him. Moreover, they often disturbed the residents, and for this simple and obvious reason, Luke had to teach them a lesson that they would remember forever. The condition of the unexpected quest was to overcome 2 village criminals, for which he would receive a reward from the head of the village when he completed the task. A thought arose in the man's head, based on which he decided to try his luck, because in any case he was already in that place. The guy pulled a satisfied smile from ear to ear and looked somewhere to the right. Suddenly, he called out to 2 characters, insulting them to some extent. Why did they quickly cast their eyes at him and began to listen attentively? Yu Seok-woo, or rather his character Luke, pointed at the bandits and asked them a question. As it turned out, he was wondering if they were too talkative. In his opinion, they should have held their long tongues. The man with 2 scars on his face tensed his eyebrows, as did his companion, and cursed out loud. And then he began to run in the direction of the main character, holding a sword in his right hand at the same time. The story continues its exciting and rapid development. This time, she begins the narrative around the main character, who quickly dodged blows from a bandit with 2 scars on his face who used a sword, when suddenly he tripped his opponent, and he, in turn, did not have time to react, so the next second he rolled head over heels on the stone floor. When he finally landed, he made a sound that meant he was in pain. The man dropped his sword from his hand that he just rolled away in the opposite direction from him. The bandit was lying on his stomach and quickly began to get up on his hands, at the same time cursing the main character. Yu Seok-woo approached him and asked him about what he had just said. The sun shone brightly on his figure, causing his face to be covered in shadow. However, this only emphasized his embittered facial features. The guy made a swinging motion with his foot and struck at his opponent. Luke enjoyed this pleasant feeling. He continued to stand over his opponent when his friend exclaimed plaintively, probably trying to make sure that he was okay. But the man did not answer anything. He just lay silently under the tall figure of the worst thief. The bald character screamed at the top of his voice, demanding that the main character remove his leg. But, apparently, he was nervous to some extent, because a small drop of sweat flowed down his left cheek. He surrendered his fist and looked at it. But Yu Seok-woo, it seems, did not hear or pretended to be stupid, because he asked his new rival's question again, to which he reacted somewhat warily. The bald guy folded his arms in surprise and arched his eyebrows. That's just the main character increased the pressure of his blow, which caused the man under him to make a pitiful sound of defeat. His companion closed his mouth in fear for his friend. Luke then grabbed the sword and said out loud that he had not done this for a long time. Anger and, to some extent, a sense of rejection lit up in his black eyes. The guy gently touched the blade, around which a bright red aura appeared. And in the next episode, the main character exclaimed that it was finally time to become the worst criminal again. The iris of his eyes became completely white, as if it was covered with white. The man made a swinging motion in order to destroy his opponent. In the new picture, he gave himself up to his reflections. According to his thoughts, the main character decided that he would no longer doubt and he would never show mercy again. He struck a blow and thus finally subdued the bandit. The system window informed readers that the guy managed to defeat one of the two village criminals. A blue glow appeared around the player's body, which turned it into large pixels. His friend fell, leaning back against a stone wall, and screamed at the top of his voice. But Yu Seok-woo was mentally thanking because of the fight. The guy was already standing in front of his opponent with an angry expression on his face, holding a dagger in his right hand, bloody. His eyes were burning with the red color of hatred. The bald man was very worried. Apparently, he was not confident in his abilities and had already accepted what would happen. The player shouted in a demanding tone of voice so that he did not dare to approach him. Tears appeared on his face. He brought his right hand closer to it and slightly covered it. In his iris, one could see the reflection of an evil silhouette. And in the next episode, the story told readers that the main character had raised his level. Moreover, the conditions of the quest were successfully fulfilled. Now he had to send to the head of the village Hamilton for a reward, where, in fact, he found himself after a short period of time. The audience saw a two-story mansion in brown and white colors with a huge territory on which there were trees in the form of large triangles or thorns. There were two guards standing behind the stone fence. They were wearing red gear with iron gloves and helmets. As a weapon, they held spears in their right hands and shields in their left. When the main character was heading in their direction with a rapid step, it attracted the attention of one of the members of the guard. The man took an attacking pose and gave the order to stop, because it was the house of the head of the village. The second one picked up his remark and also in a demanding tone of voice made it clear to Luke that he should leave as soon as possible if he did not make an appointment in advance. However, the main character raised his right hand up and pointed his thumb somewhere behind his back, at the same time saying that he had just dealt with a couple of criminals, so the guards had to check them. One eyebrow arched on his face, which gave a somewhat self-confident look to Yu Seok-woo. One of the security guards asked him a question, making sure it was true or not, to which he received an ambiguous answer, because the man told them, if they didn't believe it themselves, then they just had to go and see it. And even without doing this, one guard summed up that it looked like the truth, so he would let the player inside. And the second one explained that the user August should go and tell the head of the village about everything. When the man came to the door, he knocked and asked for forgiveness for the intrusion. He opened the door and saw an elderly man who was smiling happily. As the system suggested to readers and the main character, it was the head of the starting village, Hamilton. The character made a wave of his hand and asked the guy a question, asking why he came. The guy, in turn, was lost in his thoughts. According to them, the man seemed to be an ordinary old man, concluding that the rumors were embellished. Hamilton's house was unavailable unless there was some special reason on, then. The reason was that this mysterious NPC was almost never seen by anyone. A man with a questioning expression on his face was looking at the intruder in his estate, when suddenly the main character finally entered into a dialogue. He said he had come to report the village criminals he had dealt with, to which he replied that it was good news. Moreover, in his opinion, it was great that Luke came in person. The elderly man made it clear to him that he was going to make tea now so he could sit down. However, Yu Seok-woo just wanted to take the reward and leave, to which the man asked him a question. As it turned out, he was curious that the main character was not a fan of chatting. But after all, he stressed that sometimes it was worth playing along with the old people. Hamilton grabbed both of Luke's hands and then squeezed them hard. The picture focused the reader's attention on this. The guy began to wonder where his grandfather had such power, but he humbly gave a positive answer in such a tone of voice, as if he was being forced. In the next episode, Stratu was already pouring tea and smiling happily, as if it was his usual expression of facial expressions. Luke sat down at a wooden chair, resting his left hand on the back, and asked Grandpa to start listening to him. He said that he was very happy to have tea with the head of the village, but he was interested in the reward. The guy furrowed his eyebrows, which made him seem angry, and he, in turn, just laughed and supplemented his request, pointing out the fact that it would be tastier if special tea leaves were brewed. This angered the main character even more, who thought that he didn't even try to hear him. However, the story told that he still gave up and drank from the mug, noting to himself that the taste was really pleasant. Suddenly, a chest of jewels appeared on the table, including a flask with a potion, a scroll, a dagger, and a small outfit. Grandfather turned to his guest and made it clear that it was time to look at the awards. He happily pulled a smile from ear to ear, spreading his arms in different directions. When Yu Xiaoku had already started to pull his hands towards her, a dark aura formed around him. He said out loud that he could not believe that they were giving such a thing. Notice that the head of the village was very generous, although this could be expected from him. That's just Grandpa suddenly grabbed the main character's hand and asked him to wait. The reason was that the guy could only take one thing. After this remark, the old man's eyes began to express some kind of malice, which was emphasized by the shadow that fell on his face. He pulled a chest of jewelry inside, and Luke asked if he was joking. As it turned out, Grandpa was serious. An idea formed in the head of the main character, according to which his interlocutor was very greedy. Around him, the energy has acquired a reddish repulsive shade. He strained his eyebrows and bared his teeth, for the simple and obvious reason that he couldn't even steal anything, because the skill didn't work with these sparkling objects. The next moment, the guy asked if he had the opportunity to at least sort things out, because he just wanted to choose something and look at it at the same time. Grandfather gave a positive answer. After that, the jewelry chest was next to the guy, when suddenly his attention fell on a mysterious object, which, in his opinion, looked very curious. There was a dark energy with a purple tinge around the thing. Yu Xiaoku pulled his hand towards her, making a mysterious and interested expression on his face. As it became known after a short period of time, the main character found the object of the Lord of Shadows, which greatly surprised him, because how could the old man have such a thing? Suddenly his vision began to fail him, and the objects around became blurry and not so bright. The system notified him and the readers that the reproduction of memories that were tied to the subject had begun. A strange silhouette with a purple aura appeared before the eyes of the audience. The figure was hidden by a black hooded cloak. The stranger raised his right hand, examining something carefully, and said out loud that it was funny. He collected all the treasures in the world, but for the first time he found something like this. Moreover, according to him, this subject concealed paths to any desires. When he opened it, there was a compass inside, which indicated what its owner needed most. In his opinion, it was a pretty great addition to the collection. His red eyes hid his cunning, and the bared teeth are a trick. In the next episode, the main character was brought out of his memories by his grandfather, who asked him, making sure that he was okay. The guy gave a positive answer and shook his head in different directions, as if looking for something or someone. He didn't understand what had just happened to him. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a window in which it was written that a long time ago, the Lord of Shadows had collected the treasures he dreamed of. He left his mark on them. Yu Xiaoku could have inherited the king's strength, but he was still too weak. However, he could increase his strength by collecting treasures. The system notified him to find the values of the Shadow Lord scattered across the continent, and become the strongest. After that, the man thought that he had raised the level, but new skills or characteristics were not revealed to him. This meant that he had to collect treasures, except he wasn't sure about that. As it turned out, the guy will now see the signs of the Lord of Shadows on objects, and some of them will even contain memories. In his head, Yu Xiaoku came to the conclusion that the compass pointed to the things the owner needed. He took it. Grandfather suddenly spoke up, who replied that it was strange for a guest to choose a broken compass. However, he found him quite an interesting young man. The man waved his hands as if he couldn't do anything about it or somehow influence it. The guy's attention was attracted by a chest, next to which it was written that it was impossible to choose a reward anymore, to which the main character objected, cursing at the Lord of Shadows, because, in his opinion, it was some kind of setup. The story told that the compass of eternity was of a unique rank. It was left by a traveler full of endless dreams, but at the moment it was broken. The story continued its rapid development. In the new chapter, the narrative revolves around the grandfather, who told the main character that it was very strange on his part that he chose a broken compass, but he was a very interesting young man. The man spread his arms in different directions, as if it was not something he could influence. Yu Xiaoku, who was sitting across from him, looked at the open jewelry chest and inquiringly asked him if he really thought so. The system notified him and the readers that the selection of the award was completed, and it could no longer be selected. In Luke's opinion, it was a complete setup. His face turned half blue, and the guy himself froze and was silent for a while, when all of a sudden he screamed at the top of his voice that he was just thinking for a while, and chose the wrong thing, begging at the same time to be given another chance. However, the old man thought a little, supporting his head with his right hand. Aloud he asked a question, thus repeating the words of his guest. Only Mr. Hamilton gave a negative answer, which caused his face to express anger. A repulsive aura formed around him, which was transmitted to the main character. He rolled his eyes in surprise at that moment. A large drop of sweat ran down his face, and he himself froze, as if a charge similar to an electric one had passed through him. The old man said that his job was to deliver the main character a choice, and then make sure that he could not get another reward. Yu Seok-woo, in turn, stood up and demonstratively slammed both hands on the wooden table, cursing in his head. In the next moment, he grabbed a mug of green tea, which slightly spilled out of it. As it seemed, the character just wanted to drink more and leave, referring to the fact that the taste was simply delicious. To which Grandpa burst out laughing happily and thanked him for his kind words. That's just the story told readers that Luke was trying to come up with something. Apparently, he was trying to stall for time in this way. Even a muscle tensed on his face from the nervous mood. Suddenly, a red and black window appeared in space, which informed the main character that the head of Hamilton was grateful for his compliment. For this simple and obvious reason, the level of their relationship with the character has grown. However, according to Yu Seok-woo's thoughts, he did not need a good relationship with the old man, who was sorting out his valuables from the chest at that time. In the next episode, it became known that the guy did not agree to a broken compass. Then readers could notice how the eyes of the main character were covered with red flames. This meant that the search ability was activated. A red window with a dark shade indicated that the chosen target was the NPC head of the village of Hamilton. While the man was looking at the green gemstone, Yu Seok-woo discovered the key to the shining chest, which somewhat surprised him. The guy indulged in his thoughts. As it turned out, he didn't think that this was the one he needed right now. Suddenly, the old man closed the chest, which at the next moment Luke cast his gaze at while taking a sip from a mug of tea. According to the new episode, he had a brilliant idea. Just thinking about it made a grin appear on the guy's face, and the energy around him said that it was as if a charge, similar to an electric one, had passed through him. Then the main character found himself in a bright room, sitting at a comfortable computer chair, which stood at a round table surrounded by 3 more of the same. Other people were mixed up in the free space. Suddenly, the story focused readers' attention on Yu Seok-woo by taking a close-up of him. Suddenly his phone rang, which was lying on the table. The character was wearing a white t-shirt, over which was a black jacket. He looked at his smartphone and saw that he had received a call from Mira, which made him wonder what could have happened. She was listed in the phone book as a sister. When Yu Seok-woo put it to his left ear, he immediately greeted, as he put it, "Misses you to the world." The guy asked her how things were going. However, he was a little busy, so the main character asked her to call him back a little later. The character leaned on a chair and scratched his head while closing his eyes, which made his face take on a childish expression. There were objections on the other side. The girl asked in a demanding voice how her brother could behave in such a way. A heroine with large dark eyes and blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail appeared before the eyes of readers. She exclaimed that it was the first time his smallest little sister had called in such a long time. The girl was sitting on the bed, on which there was a pair of pink pillows and a large teddy bear. However, the main character replied that he was just joking, but decided that it would be reasonable to ask what the matter was. As it turned out, nothing special. The heroine was interested in whether her brother would be at their house this month. Their mom really missed him, and so did she. The heroine strained her eyebrows, which made her expression seem focused and tense. To which the man replied that he understood her, because he needed time to think. From his sister's remark, a drop of sweat flowed from the main character, as if he was transfusing and was afraid to start this conversation. That's just the girl insisted on her own, saying that her brother did not just think, but just came and said goodbye to him. In the next episode, the story tells that Yu Seok-woo had enough to do above the roof, and now he also has to go to his family. He had a headache from all the noise. He relaxed, resting his head on his right hand and lowering the smartphone on the table. In his opinion, it was all because of the greedy village head. In his head, he had an evil appearance, sinister eyes, under which there were dark circles from the shadow, sharp teeth and funny bonds that gave the atmosphere an intimidating shade. A blue fire burned around the silhouette of a man, and in his left hand he held the golden key to the treasure chest. The main character thought that it was very easy to steal the key, but to find the chest, it could give him several problems. Yu Seok-woo clutched his head with both hands, which was filled with different thoughts. As it turned out, he was concerned about the fact that the head of the village was always in his house, and it annoyed him a lot, so much so that small tongues of smoke appeared from the top of his head. Suddenly, someone interrupted the huge flow of his thoughts. The guy was taken aback and saw someone's hand in front of him, which was holding out a red jar to him. After a short period of time, it became clear to readers that it was a girl with short black hair and large purple eyes. She asked the main character if anything bothered him, and he, in turn, gave an ambiguous answer. He also asked her a question, according to which there was no point in telling everything. The reason was that his interlocutor would not understand anything. In the next episode, Yu Seok-woo opened a can of soda and gave the heroine a chance to answer. She seemed surprised because the girl tensed her eyebrows, which caused her expression to become somewhat offended. She crossed her arms over her chest and watched the guy for a while, taking a deep breath. However, as readers may have noticed to themselves, it affected the man. Yu Seok-woo made it clear out loud that there wasn't anything serious. He just needed someone to leave one place because he wasn't going to do it. The stranger asked him a question. She was interested in what the guy would do when he did leave, and he, in turn, demonstratively exhaled and continued that he would not say about it. The heroine tried to help him by recommending to make him leave. It seemed to the main character that she wasn't listening to him at all. The next moment the girl said, it would be easier to explain as follows. The man needed to create a situation in which someone simply could not stay. For example, to arrange some kind of trap. This phrase caught Yu Seok-woo's attention. It was clear from the expression on his thoughtful face. In his head, he thought about why he hadn't thought of making a trap earlier. The main character got up from his chair and pointed somewhere to his left. As it turned out, he asked the girl if he could come in from her place, to which she asked him a question when he would do it, making the assumption that right now. In the next episode, Yu Seok-woo gave a positive response. He expressed his thought aloud, according to which he thought that the heroine really helped him solve the riddle. He smiled happily and pointed at her, and then the guy said words of gratitude and promised that he would repay her a little later. The heroine only asked him to tell her later what happened in the game, August. At that moment, the guy was already opening her place and gave her a thumbs up in a gesture that he would do so. A stranger with short black hair and purple eyes thought to herself that the situation was developing perfectly. Based on Yu Seok-woo's thoughts, he just had to make sure that the village head in the game couldn't help but leave his house. The main character began to turn on the computer, although readers could notice that for some reason his face expressed uncertainty. As it turned out, the character could freely enter the house of the head. Suddenly, the story described how a bright blue glow with a white reflection appeared in space. It was so bright that it could blind. And the figure of the main character suddenly began to take shape of his character in the game, Luke. He had such a face. Moreover, even the expression of facial expressions remained the same. Only two silhouettes could be distinguished by their clothes. Mentally, Yu Seok-woo summed up, thus telling his rival, that is, the old man, that if he let him in, then he should be prepared for being robbed. When suddenly the narrative of the picture came back a few hours ago. Readers saw a huge two-story house of the head of Hamilton, around which there were many trees in the form of triangles or thorns. He was in the starting village. Then the picture zoomed in, bringing a close-up on two guards in red robes with iron armor and spears as weapons. When suddenly someone's foot appeared in front of them. As it turned out, it was the main character. He was walking towards the two guards with a joyful expression on his face, one of whom exclaimed that Luke had come to them again. He, in turn, waved his hand in a gesture that it was him. As it turned out, the village head was already waiting for him. A tall iron gate was opened in front of Yu Seok-woo's face, which, in fact, he went into in the next episode. When the man opened the front door, he pulled a smile from ear to ear, at the same time saying that he was finally here, calling out to the head of Hamilton. The man just approached the main character, spreading both arms in different directions, as if he wanted to hug his guest. Grandpa smiled and exclaimed that Luke had finally deigned to appear in his house. The guy greeted him and pointedly scratched his head. In the next episode, he sat down on a wooden chair and clutched his head as if it hurt him. After a short period of time, readers became aware that the cunning character told the kind old man that he felt bad today, so he made a request to make him tea, because he simply could not forget about this wonderful drink. Grandpa just hung up on this remark. This could be understood by the light aura that formed around his head. Yu Seok-woo asked him to take his time, anointing him with his hand in this gesture, when suddenly his eyes lit up with a scarlet flame, because he said that his interlocutor could even linger. The theft was successful. The main character received the key to the shining chest. When tea was served to him, the guy uttered words of gratitude, to which the kind man simply nodded and smilingly took a chair. All he had to do was find the chest. Moreover, he had already inspected the first floor, but noticed nothing interesting. Yu Seok-woo took a sip and thought that he needed to go to the second one, for the simple and obvious reason that he wasn't looking only there. He said out loud that the taste warmed his heart, to which Grandpa Hamilton said words of gratitude. The time has come. The head of the village was grateful to him for the compliment. and now the level of their relationship with the character has grown. Except he didn't need it anymore. A question rang in his head, according to which Luce was waiting for someone. He glanced at the door that had been knocked on, and Grandpa at that moment asked the guy to wait a little. They waved to each other. The story tells readers that a man named Houghton appeared on the threshold of a huge house. The old man asked him why he had come. He was a huge and muscular character with a bald head. He was a blacksmith, as it turned out. The character turned to the head and let him know that they had problems with the ditch, so he needed to check it out together. However, the head of the village asked himself a question, according to which he was interested in what happened this time. As it turned out, everything was clogged with mud. The last word alerted Grandfather. He looked at his guest, and then at his shoes, which, by the way, were in the mud. He was distracted by a blacksmith asking him a question, wondering if everything was in order. However, the man gave a negative answer and decided to go and see while the main character was waiting for him on the spot. When he disappeared, the smug expression of the facial expression came off the main character's face, because everything was going according to his plan, because he had killed so much time to block the ditch. But it was worth it. The chapter would have to walk in one direction for about 10 minutes, so Luke had to hurry. He climbed the stairs and thought about how exciting it was to start a treasure hunt. Many years ago, an extra-dimensional storm broke out on Earth. In the course of this, a large number of mythical creatures from other dimensions were discovered. Gods, ghosts, werewolves, angels, demons, elves. Each of these unearthly beings belongs to its own class. There are 4 of them in total: mortal, legendary, epic, and mythical. Whatever ideas they have about them, their incredible abilities and destructive power will greatly exceed all expectations. People, in turn, belong to the lower class. However, if you put a lot of effort into strengthening your body and spirit, you can improve your class. In addition to constantly improving spiritual power, there is another way to achieve this. This is a way to significantly accelerate the process of evolution. Its essence is to hunt unearthly creatures from other dimensions and appropriate their crystals to yourself. However, the places where they have to live are famous for their danger, and going there is a deadly risk. An older man with gray hair on both sides of his head and thick eyebrows of the same color calls Zu-an. He has to repeat his name twice and much louder, because the young guy with blue hair does not hear him, quietly snuffling on his folded arms, which now serve him instead of a soft pillow. Having received no reaction, the teacher exhales and looks down at the floor. The last director had a pretty high opinion of this guy. In one of their meetings, this man with light blonde hair and a sandy-colored long coat tells him about 2 types of geniuses. Mr. Q-Bai follows him, listening intently. A man refers Zu-an to the first type, while everyone else belongs to the second. And if at first teacher Q could agree with his words, now, when the guy who jumped up from his seat runs to the exit from the office, he thinks that the director was mistaken about him. In the rays of the golden evening sun, Zu-an runs to the sports field of their educational institution. With a heavy exhalation, he settles down on the concrete tile, leaning against the iron grid of the football field. He is looking at a bookmark-like, but unremarkable-looking white smartphone in his hands. His life changed significantly when he got this phone. Being a good student and someone who is constantly looking for new ways of self-improvement, he quickly gave up on all this because of the game on this phone. To access it, you need to unlock it with a drop of blood, and then click on the icon of the only application on the desktop. Zu-an casually looks around, makes sure that no one is nearby, and again brings the needle to his finger. The second drop gives you the opportunity to create your own character in the game. Now his little pixel copy with the same dark brown hair, and even a hairstyle exactly like the guy's looks at him through the screen. By improving the skills of the character in the game, you can quickly and, most importantly, safely improve yourself in reality. The young man quickly moves his fingers across the phone screen, following the instructions in the game. Right now he has to defeat a mortal being, a mighty ant. His little copy follows the movement of his fingers on the screen and performs all the activated actions. There are many geniuses in society who have developed their spiritual strength by the age of 16. However, among them Zu-an is the only one who was able to improve his spirit through meditation and asceticism. He was able to do this without any outside help. Mr. Q-Bai has been thinking about this for a long time. All the teachers and students of this school assumed that Zu-an would definitely achieve great success in the future. With his strength, it wouldn't be difficult for him to take first place in the upcoming martial arts skills test. But no one could have thought that just a month ago there would be a daredevil who would dare to challenge Zu-an himself. The crowd surrounding the new student of their school is constantly whispering about such rash courage. Someone exclaims that it is complete madness only to transfer to another school, but to challenge the one who occupies an honorable first place in it. The crowd disperses as soon as they see Zhu Wen, who has come to this noise. He puts his hands in the pockets of his sweatpants and indifferently asks the girl if they have met before. She doesn't say anything except that she tells him to attack. There is a flash of confidence in her light blue eyes, and she deftly prevents Zhu Wen's reception. Her resinous blue hair develops slightly as she lands on the shiny gym floor. The students look at her in shock, then at the lying Zhu Wen. This girl, it's definitely because of her, Q Bai thinks. After Jing defeated him with just one move, Zhu Wen seemed to have been replaced. Now all he does is sleep in all the lessons. Zhu Wen moves the joystick, directing the character to collect all the fallen crystals. These crystals remain from defeated enemies, and if the winner absorbs them, they have a positive effect on him and improve his skills. In this game, the user can also see the characteristics that cannot be done in real life. Zhu Wen is in the mortal class, and just a month ago his parameters were extremely low. Now his strength has risen by 2 units, his speed and body have increased by 1, and his spirit has risen by 3. The guy thinks about the fact that, continuing to improve only with the help of meditations through suffering alone, he probably would not have been able to get such a result even in a few years. The only thing that upsets him is the inability to transfer the obtained crystals from the game to the real world. In that case, he could live happily ever after by selling low-level crystals. He is only distracted from the game for a moment, but this is enough for a red mutant ant to suddenly appear out of nowhere and cause damage to him. His speed and strength are much higher than ordinary ants, and if Zhu Wen had enough time, he would be able to defeat him. However, there are more and more monsters around him. Zhu Wen does not notice a girl with short cherry-colored hair not far from him. Her hair is in harmony with the clothes in beige and pale pink tones on her. Her cream hoodie has 3 cute bows, its sleeves almost completely cover her small arms, and all this creates an unusual but refined contrast with her dark rough shorts. Her sudden visit surprises and worries Zhu Wen at the same time. The main thing is that the purpose of her visit here was not to search for Zhu Wen. He thinks about it along with the thoughts that in no case should he let her know about the secret of this phone right now. Unfortunately for Zhu Wen, she stands right in front of him. He hurries to find out what she wants, and the girl opposite relaxes in her face. The reason for the search for Zhu Wen was the upcoming final exam, which will test the combat skills of students. She holds out her palm and invites him to join her team. It seems to him that he misheard, so he clarifies her intentions from Fan Josie. He is interested in why the girl chose him and wants to team up with him for the final exam, but his thoughts are in the game. His character is about to lose all his powers. As it turned out, Fan Josie needs the highest score on this exam, so she is going to recruit strong students to her team. According to her, Zhu Wen is a great fit. With a barely noticeable longing on his face, the guy tells her that he is no longer the Zhu Wen that the whole school knows. The girl contradicts his words. For her, Zhu Wen will always be Zhu Wen. Even after a while, despite the fact that he has changed, she still considers him the only one from Guide whom she considers a worthy rival. The guy asks her about Jing. It is probably better suited for the composition of the Fan Josie team. It becomes sudden news for him that Jing, it turns out, has long been transferred from their school. Josie says she has no idea where exactly she will continue her studies now, but she is sure of one thing for sure: she is above the mortal class. She notes that Jing's appearance at their school was as unusual as her disappearance. It might seem that she came to their school just to challenge Zhu Wen. It seemed to her that she had known him for a long time, so she wanted to settle accounts with him. The guy remembers the image of the girl from the day when he first saw her in the walls of the gym, and assures that this cannot be. They really had never met before, so what kind of grievances could she have? He casually concludes about it and wraps his hands around the phone more comfortably. Fan Josie decides to leave this topic aside and resolve the issue with the team until the end. She again asks his opinion on this matter. She had no doubt that Zhu Wen would agree, so she is not at all surprised when he nods affirmatively to her request. She throws her backpack over her shoulder, saying at the exit from the site that 2 more participants have been found for the team. From now on, the 4 of them will have to train during practical classes so that on the day of the exam they can act together and understand each other. As soon as she moves away from the playground for a long distance, the guy again focuses all his attention on the game. The corner of his pinched lips lifts on one side, revealing something like a smile. He decides that he will check the characteristics at home after the battle, but the phone gets very hot in his hand and he drips scarlet liquid on the screen again. He wonders what kind of skill can be obtained from the ant he defeated, but the skill of his spiritual power has now been upgraded to the 7th level. The ash-haired youth is perplexed about Zhu Wen. Josie claims that this is not a joke, and Zhu Wen is now part of their team. The guys know he's strong enough, but he hasn't trained for a whole month, so they have doubts about him. It will probably be difficult for him to return to the previous level. One of them is sure that Zhu Wen is not the best candidate for their team for the purpose of taking first place during the combat skills test. A swarthy blonde man is talking about a certain Zheng Yi. He is his old friend, so he offers to invite him instead of Zhu Wen. Confusion appears on Zhu Wen's face. This quick check significantly affects the future life of students. It plays a significant role in admission to a prestigious school and during employment. This test is a kind of opportunity to show your best side and get the opportunity to become a part of high society. Moreover, the safety of the others in the team depends on the strength of the teammates, so Zhu Wen understands the doubts of the other participants. Fan Ruoxi admits that Zheng Yi is indeed an outstanding fighter, but she still thinks that Zhu Wen is more suitable. The blonde man, for the sake of justice, offers to conduct a small test for Zhu Wen with his consent. This will help them determine whether to keep him in the team or not. He declares that among all those present here, he is the weakest, so Zhu Wen must fight him. If he wins, he will definitely join their team. He considers it a fair way out of the situation. The guy does not mind, but he is afraid because of possible victims. The blonde repeats that the school has a strength meter, but, according to him, artificial numbers are boring. Tian Zhangdong continues to insist on a fight. Josie frowns. She is visited by different thoughts. It looks like they are really going to measure strength now. Tian Zhangdong makes excellent use of the thunderclap cultivation method. He mainly specializes in flashes of power, and the Thunder Fist skill is a great addition to all this. Zhu Wen often practiced meditation through suffering. However, he never bought life force crystals for better cultivation speed. His family probably has financial problems, so she won't be surprised at all if he doesn't have a life force skill. It seems to her that Zhu Wen, despite the fact that he agreed to conduct the test, will refuse. And so it happens. He suggests that the guys check everything on the school strength meter, but they grin at such a sudden change in his mood. He is really afraid, but this fear is not due to an actual fear of losing, but to the fact that he will send him to eternal sleep. They get to the force meter in one of the school corridors. Unable to decide who will be the first, Tian Zhangdong volunteers to start their trial. He needs his fists, getting closer to the meter with each step, takes aim and swings to strike. Zhu Wen recalls the small difference between this strength meter and the characteristics in the game. He is sure that if there is a difference, it is not significant at all. When he first found that mysterious phone with the game, his strength was only 7 units. Teacher Q Bai wanders along the corridor of the school, barely illuminated by the last orange rays of the evening sun on the horizon, and his attention is attracted by muffled sounds coming straight from the entertainment room. He stealthily approaches the slightly open door, deciding not to enter yet. Next, he is amazed and cannot believe his eyes at the level of Zhu Wen's strength. He probably drew conclusions only from what Zhu Wen showed. He could sleep soundly in class, but thereby save energy for diligent training. What is more incredible is this guy's skillful skill to use the most difficult punch. Thanks to him, he was now able to get a score of 10 units on the strength meter. Tian Zhangdong feels oppressed. He agrees with Zhu Wen joining their team, but warns not to get conceited just because of the fact that he is lucky to beat him now. One of the guys in the team is having fun with such careful control of his image by Tian Zhangdong. He is not going to give up, again overcoming the distance to the meter and strikes again. This time, 11 units of Tian Zhangdong's strength are flashing on the blue screen of the meter. The old confidence returns to his face. He smiles confidently. Zhu Wen definitely won't come out victorious this time. He thoughtfully examines the meter while Zhangdong assures him that there is nothing wrong with losing. Zhu Wen wonders if he will have to pay damages to the school if he accidentally breaks it, and Zhangdong promises to pay for it if he really breaks it. Teacher Q is still watching them and the surprise does not leave his face. Zhu Wen clasps his hands at a lock at chest level and it takes only a moment before he, using the skill of spiritual power, breaks the meter. Tian Zhangdong was sure that Zhu Wen was only pretending to be someone unknown. This device is designed to measure strength and its maximum limit is only 20 units. And previously he could say with confidence that Zhu Wen would barely be able to approach his level of strength. However, what he saw now made him doubt his beliefs. Q Bai remembers the words spoken by the last headmaster of the school. Is Zhu Wen really a genius? Although the maximum value of the power level of the meter does not exceed 20 units, you need to have a spiritual force skill at least at the 8th or 9th level to be able to break the device. Zhu Wen clarifies the seriousness of Tian Zhangdong's intention to pay for the damaged meter. The latter slaps him on the shoulder and nods affirmatively. Previously, they were classmates, but at the moment they are now together in the same team, so he can rely on him. Josie is sure that Zhu Wen is a much more interesting person than he is now. Soon after leaving their company, Zhu Wen slowly walks through the empty streets of the city. The sun has almost set. Only its last rays reach the roofs of skyscrapers, trying to cling to their ledges so that the darkness of the night does not completely engulf them. He recalls that this afternoon, Fan Ruoxi, coming to his playground, reminded him of a case from the past when Jing voluntarily challenged him, a mere mortal. Although it is not an unknown fact that usually people who manage to move to the legendary class consider it beneath their dignity even to be near people from the mortal class. He does not understand how he could somehow cross her path, because he has never left guide in his life. He is pulled out of his thoughts by the vibration of the phone in his pants pocket. He accepts a call from his father, and he hurries to ask if his son will attend his wedding. The news of his father's wedding becomes sudden and arouses a little curiosity in Zhu Wen. He continues to walk slowly along the barely lit street while his father is distracted in order to send him a photo of his chosen one. A woman with purple hair barely reaching her shoulders, as Zhu Wen sees, opening a message with a photo, is called Yang Lan. Next, the father informs that their wedding ceremony will take place in Luoyang in about a week. If Zhu Wen had a strong desire to attend the ceremony, he would still not be able to go, because during this period, the martial arts skills test will take place. He notifies his father about this and then asks about a metal cookie box at their house. The young man describes in detail the appearance of the box so that the father could have a more accurate idea. This is a square iron box, each side of which is about 30 centimeters. A cartoon bear is depicted on its lid, and it is dark green in color. This is the box that contained Zhu Wen's much-loved cookies. However, at the present time, cookies from this company have long been impossible to buy. He asks his father if he put the phone in it. At first, his father does not immediately understand him, but clarifies his appearance, an unremarkable white smartphone with a black screen, which even lacks any buttons. Zhu Wen's voice sounds lively, because this is exactly the phone he has in mind. It turns out that the phone does not belong to his father. The owner of this phone was his grandfather. The father laughs into the phone, admitting that he would have forgotten about this phone if Zhu Wen hadn't reminded him about it. Zhu Wen is driven by a genuine interest in finding out where his grandfather got this phone from. The father tells his son that during the restoration of Guide, his grandfather worked as a carpenter. He needed to repair a large number of old wooden buildings, so the period of his work lasted more than 1 year. On one of the working days, having stayed to work overtime, their team dug an old, almost collapsed well at the construction site. From its shallow depth, something unusually sparkled with an azure radiance. For a brief moment, it seemed to the workers that they had found a treasure and were about to become rich. The glowing something turned out to be an old wooden box. There were characteristic cracks on its lid, through which bright light made its way. There was a phone inside the box itself. They tested it for operability, but it turned off almost immediately, as if it was discharged. He already had no buttons and a charging connector at that time. The team of workers was very disappointed with this outcome. They quickly lost interest in the found thing, deciding that someone decided to play them in such a stupid way. Grandpa put the phone in his toolbox. The father says that during his youth he took the phone for repair, because it did not even turn on, and hoped to get at least some benefit from it. But the specialist assured that the smartphone was worth nothing. That's when he put the phone in the box. He grins briefly when he asks if his son also wanted to get money from him. Zhu Wen's mind is spinning with the idea that most likely no one has managed to turn on this phone before him. He tells his father that it would be a big mistake to exchange this phone, but he repeats that it is useless to hope to restore it. No one knows exactly how long he has been lying, and it is not known about his performance at all. It is either broken or completely discharged. The place where this phone was first found is the old town of Guide. It is there that the martial arts skills test will take place. If possible, Zhu Wen will try to find this well. For several days, Zhu Wen has been thinking about the mysterious phone. Now that his original location became known, he aroused even more interest in the guy. He still continues to sleep in all classes, skipping the lectures of teacher Q Bai, but trains hard with the team. The young man of short stature, about 160 centimeters, shouts, calling for the guy running ahead of him to stop. He doesn't listen to him, but stops when he bumps into someone. The guy with long blonde hair in front of him is silent, humbling him with an indifferent look. A short guy catches up with him and squats next to him. He asks if he's okay, but all his friend's attention is focused on the creepy tall young man. He doesn't even pay any attention to him when he apologizes. Tian Zhangdong regretfully announces that he will not be able to continue being a member of their team. His friend called him to his team, so he has to go. The preparation time is nearing completion. At such a moment it will be difficult to find a new strong participant. Zhu Wen talks about Tian Zhangdong's departure to Lai Zhai, but learns from him that he too is forced to leave the team for personal reasons. He does not disclose them, but offers his sincere apologies. Fan Josie looks guiltily at the floor. Now she looks like a little girl who is going to be scolded. Her voice trembles slightly. She makes great efforts to start a conversation. But Zhu Wen understands everything without words. He ruffles her strawberry red hair and apologizes. Probably someone wants to deal with him because of what innocent people suffered. Fan Ruoxi only needed a high grade for the martial arts exam, and he regrets that everything turned out this way. Before it's too late, she should find someone else to get a good grade for sure, otherwise he will be upset. The person Zhu Wen has displeased definitely has a huge influence, so she warns him to be extremely careful. Zhu Wen is walking along the corridor of the school in an unknown direction, immersed in his own thoughts. Verification is really important, and there is little time to prepare, where he can quickly find a person who will become a partner for him and whom he can trust. He thinks about this as he passes by another office, until Teacher Yu calls out to him from behind the slightly open door of the next one. He's talking about a certain Commander N. His real name is Tian Zuo. He holds a very high position. Teacher Yu does not understand how Zhu Wen can be sure that he does not know anything about him, because then how could the commander criticize a simple high school student without having any connections with him? It all seems very strange. The teacher tells in more detail about the origin of Commander Tian Zuo. He comes from a noble family and in his early 20s already holds a high post. Mr. Tian is one of the important military officials of the eastern zone of the country. He has great power in his hands. Zhu Wen does not fully understand the young master's position towards him. Teacher Yu is also not sure, but he does not doubt one thing for sure: one word from official Tian against Zhu Wen, and those who want to curry favor with him will do anything. Does he really not think that with his status, one wrong word he says can destroy the future of an ordinary schoolboy? Zhu Wen does not leave the thought that there may be some kind of connection between Tian Zuo and Njing. The teacher does not claim, but does not deny such a possibility. However, it doesn't matter now. Zhu Wen urgently needs to find a team and register for verification. He reminds him that the deadline for submitting applications expires the day after tomorrow. In no case should he delay for a second, otherwise he may not be in time. The man hints that it is not necessary to recruit ordinary students to the team. He gives a personal recommendation to Zhu Wen to team up with Lai Zu-an so that no one can disturb him for sure. In return, they should get the highest score due to Zhu Wen's strength, and Lai Zu-an should be the best in their team. Thus, he would have to act solely in Zu-an's interests. In any case, to take even if not the first place among the team, but at least some is better than not being able to participate in the check at all. After a long conversation with the teacher, Zhu Wen leaves the school and calls his father. Perhaps the father knows who Tian Zuo is, so he immediately asks him about him. For a moment, he is speechless when his father on the other side of the phone asks him how he found out that Tian Zuo is his older brother. He clutches the phone to his ear, not believing what is happening. Tian Zuo is the son of Miss Yang Lan, his father's new wife. If they get married, Tian Zuo will become his older brother. The father is quiet for a while, and then loudly exclaims that in addition to his brother, he will have a younger sister in Jing. According to his father, and Tian Zuo and Xiao Jing treat him very well. I can't understand why then they are so categorical about Zhu Wen himself. Maybe, deep down, they are both negatively opposed to his father's marriage with Yang Lan. And Jing had only one combat move to defeat him without much effort, and because of her brother Tian Zuo, he almost lost the opportunity to take the entrance exam. He realizes that he is still too weak. If he was an epic class strongman, would they be able to do anything to him? He goes home with these thoughts. Very soon Zhu Wen finds himself inside an unremarkable-looking gray high-rise building. Among the tall and new houses in the area where he lives, his house is quite plain. In the last few days, the guy spent almost all his free time playing on that mysterious phone, as a result of which his apartment lost its original appearance. There are bags of garbage in the corner, which the guy forgot to throw out every time, and cardboard boxes are lying around somewhere nearby. Coupled with the dark interior of the apartment, all this looks much worse. Spending all his free days in the game, Ju-wen did not manage to get anything but a crystal with the skill of spiritual power, which fell out after his victory on the day when Fan Ruoxi came to him on the sports field. Just when he thinks about it, something finally falls to him. It turns out to be a small yellow egg that stores a pet. It is very ambiguous that he got something like this, because most often mortal class players rarely have a companion pet. It is mainly present in those who have managed to reach the legendary class. He presses the egg with a concentrated expression on his face, and something huge, hidden behind a bright white flash, appears before him. At the moment, Ju-wen loses consciousness, but after waking up, he discovers a red symbol with sharp ends on his hand. He massages his head to relieve the unbearable pain, while simultaneously exploring the bed with his hand in search of a phone. Probably, the companion pet has already hatched. Now he has his own mighty mutant ant. He has a large maroon-colored physique and also belongs to the mortal class. His strength, body and spirit are equal to 9 units, which is considered a good indicator, and his speed is equal to 5 units. His innate Titan Fist skill is listed at the 9th level, which is also a high characteristic. Ju-wen decides to summon him, which is why he is now tightly closing the dark blue curtains on all the windows in the room. He puts his hands on his sides, wondering how to do it. The young man is in turmoil, but decides that it is worth thinking about a pet. He barely closes his eyes for a moment, but he feels a tingling sensation in the place where the drawing is located. A massive glove appears on his hand. It looks like a mighty ant that has become his companion pet. So this is his form. They say that having a pet helps to improve the characteristics of the user himself. Most likely, his pet will improve his strength. Ju-wen's house is not that big and is not suitable to test the strength of his pet. He decides to just take a closer look at the glove on his hand. But suddenly it starts to glow and completely disintegrates into small parts. The drawing, which has been hiding under her dense fabric all this time, also becomes brighter due to this, and the next moment red lightning flutters from it in different directions. The giant mutant ant emits an eerie hiss, it clicks its paws, and its large eyes and mouth glow with an azure blue light. Ju-wen is horrified by his creepiness and terrible appearance, because in the game, being smaller in size and due to the game drawing, he looked much nicer. But now, thanks to its dimensions, it can easily ride it. The next day, late in the evening, when the sky was lit only by dim little stars, Teacher Yu takes Ju-wen to a meeting with Lai Zu-an. From the story of Teacher Yu, it becomes known that Lai Zu-an is a lover of flaunting everything. But despite this fact, he is still a good person. In any case, they are united only by the upcoming exam, so the teacher assures that you should not take it personally. In the absolute silence that filled the space around them after their short conversation, they soon arrive at the building referred to as the Imperial Health Club. The large building is expensively equipped inside. It is quite simple, the ceilings are quite high, and glass crystals sparkle on every chandelier that they meet on the way to the second young Mr. Lai. One of the employees, who met them at the entrance and dressed in a classic black suit, kindly shows them the way to the young gentleman until they overcome a long corridor and find themselves opposite the right room. Inside the spacious room, absolute darkness reigns, and only from somewhere a pleasant melody coming to the ears and the subdued light of the same large chandeliers make the atmosphere here more pleasant. In a room with a luxurious interior, they notice a young gentleman in the company of several girls. 2 of them sit on either side of him and laugh loudly from time to time. The young gentleman turns his attention to the teacher who has come and someone quiet behind his back. He invites him to sit down and have a drink, but Teacher Yu refuses, citing the presence of evening classes. He hurries to introduce Zu-an to Ju-wen, with whom they will be partners in the exam. The young man in all white confidently declares that he has no doubts about Teacher Yu, so he will allow Ju-wen to join him. The teacher needs to go back to school, so he leaves them to discuss all the issues related to checking combat skills. He promises to help Ju-wen register for the exam later, but in the meantime tells him to get to know Lai Zu-an better so that they can understand each other well during the test. As soon as Teacher Yu leaves the room, leaving them alone, Zu-an finally pays attention to him. He has heard of him as the #1 genius of the guide school. Ju-wen awkwardly rubs his neck and replies that you should not believe the usual rumors about him. The young gentleman agrees with his words, because Guide is quite a small city, where can a genius come from here? If that were the case, and Jing wouldn't have defeated him with just 1 punch. Zu-an talks about this, thoughtfully peering into his glass. Next, he says that they won't need any coordination training. Ju-wen just needs to obey and not get in the way. When the time comes, then everything will go more than fine. The young gentleman is still interested in something from him, but Zhu Wen's entire attention is focused on the phone in his hands. Zu-an whispers something in the ear of one of the girls nearby, and she jokingly grumbles at him, but gets up from her seat and goes to Zhu Wen. She sits down on the sofa next to him, snuggling too close for strangers, and is interested in his game. The young man does not pay attention to her at all and ignores the questions coming one after another. The girl is insulted by such a disregard in her direction, and she, squeezing his chin in her hand, abruptly turns his head to her. Zhu Wen almost loses the fight in the game when he pushes her away from him. It seems that he overdid it with force, because the girl fell to the floor. From the laughter, Zhu Wen and the other girls can't help but laugh even more. Zhu Wen still loses the game. The young gentleman grins to himself, finding this behavior of the guy funny. Zhu Wen spends the rest of the day at Mr. Zu-an's house. During all this time, he has never been distracted from the game again. Time passes unnoticed and the evening outside the window is replaced by a deep night. Mr. Lai has been sleeping in the next room for a long time, but the sounds from Zhu Wen's game disturb his sleep. Opening his eyes, he does not understand what is the matter, and as soon as he hears muffled sounds from the room where they were in the afternoon, he gently rises from the bed. Zhu Wen played the game all night, but was unable to achieve anything during that time. The flying ants he's fighting are strong enough, but they haven't reached the legendary class yet. It is quite possible to defeat them, but first Zhu Wen needs to get at least the opportunity to strike. The fist of a titan at the 9th level of strength is capable of dealing powerful damage to a flying ant with silver wings. However, it takes longer than all other techniques. The guy doubts his ability to combine a crushing fist with an inch punch, which he is good at, with the fist of a titan. Since he is a character in this game, according to his theory, by improving the crushing fist with an inch punch in real life, the game character will also be able to synchronize with this improvement. Zhu Wen gets up from the sofa, moving to the side, and stands in a stand. He abruptly moves his hands alternately, practicing the blow, while Zu-an watches him from the side through the window of the door. He wonders why Zhu Wen trains at such a late time, notices that he uses an inch punch, the applied force and amplitude of which are too large. He's too sleepy right now to concentrate on that. His prolonged yawn testifies to this and he, lazily stretching, decides to return to the bedroom. Zhu Wen needs to be at school early in the morning, as the entrance exams start today. There is silence throughout the school, because the classrooms are crowded with students who are now writing the first part of the exam. Lai Zu-an was in the audience with him. He is just like the others here, focused on the test. After a long time, when all the anxiety remains in the classrooms, and the forms of each of the students are handed over, they all leave the school with long-awaited relief. Some of them are met at the entrance by their parents, who shared their experiences here and hug them tightly. After a few days of rest, the second stage of the entrance tests begins. The bus provided by the school takes students to the old town of Guide. Zhu Wen attentively examines the first visible surroundings through the window. A few years ago, after an out-of-space storm that broke out strongly then, a rift appeared here, as a result of which everything around turned into an interdimensional zone. Local animals and plants have also undergone various changes due to the impact of other dimensions. Troops are stationed on the territory of this ancient city, so now it is forbidden to enter without a pass. Zhu Wen is thinking about the martial skills test, which will be the next stage of their entrance exams, which is about to begin. One by one, the students get off the bus to the building where the second stage of the exams will take place. It looks like an extension of a traditional Chinese palace, and several dozen military around it, like guards, keep order around. There is no way to see their faces, they are hidden behind dark glasses and balaclavas, and they themselves are wearing heavy body armor. While Lai Zu-an and the others have not yet arrived, Zhu Wen is considering the territory of their temporary camp for the period of entrance exams. Looking around, his blue eyes cling to the roof of the building. Just as he begins to peer at something like a handprint in a concrete wall, without having time to think about what it might be, the phone in his pants pocket starts vibrating. He thinks that his father is calling him, but it turns out not to be so. There is no ringer function in this phone and it has never vibrated before until today. Then what was the reason now? The guy is amazed at his own inattention, because he had not previously noticed the camera application in it. Surely this camera is in it for a reason, so you don't need to use it as a camera in standard phones. He points the camera at everything around him and tries to press the shutter, but it does not work. Most likely, the camera functionality does not work. He tries to point the camera at the same incomprehensible print on the wall. In the phone screen, it glows green, and then beeps and the download is activated on the screen. He looks at the desktop and sees the icon of a new application that has appeared, which is called the Ancient City of Guide. Now he has free time to explore this, so he goes to the most deserted place in the camp and activates the phone. He really manages to log into a new application. The building from the camp has completely moved into the game, and now he can explore it from the inside. Inside, the building looks like the inside of an ancient city. He moves as a character only a little, but a creature from another dimension comes out of the darkness to meet him. The skeleton soldier turns out to be larger than his character, and in the next second runs at him with an attack. Ju-wen is at this location for the first time in the game, so the speed and strength of his character are not very great. But still, fighting with a skeleton soldier is much more interesting than with giant ants. He skillfully repels all the sudden attacks of the skeleton, dealing him only one retaliatory blow. That's enough for him to fall to the ground. What is more surprising for Ju-wen is the crystal with the skill that fell immediately from the first fighter. He will certainly activate a new blue crystal and does not feel that much pain when he received the crushing fist skill. The sign that appeared on the display at that moment says that he has now studied the touch of the skeleton. Only 1 unit of spiritual power is spent on it. Ju-wen remembers that this skill is a skill of the spiritual power of skeleton soldiers. He belongs to a low-level skill, but since a fairly small amount of energy is spent on him, he decides to explore this territory to test his strength at the same time. He calls his companion pet to make it more convenient. He pushes all the new skeleton soldiers out of his way. The guy is depressed by the fact that despite how much he has already passed the way, he still has not received anything except the crystal at the very beginning. Ju-wen walks another short distance before an army of skeleton soldiers suddenly appears out of nowhere in his path. There are too many of them for him to resist them. Therefore, the next moment the game ends and crashes as soon as an army of unearthly creatures attacks him. He thinks that the opponent is strong enough, and in the exam he will need to avoid a collision with Jing. A strange sense of someone else's presence does not leave him, so he turns around and sees her stern, sharp gaze directed directly at him. He does not understand the reason for her visit here, but the girl abruptly reaches out to his face with a clenched fist with something. The guy catches himself thinking that she did not come to him again with good intentions, but Jing says that Uncle Feng, who is also Ju-wen's father, asked to tell him this. The young man examines a small flash drive in his hand, and Jing openly says that his father should not have done this. She believes that it is pointless to waste your energy on people who themselves go against the path of improvement. Jing is almost leaving when he stops and looks at the guy over his shoulder. Her gaze expresses an open dislike for the young man, and she warns him not to dare to tell anyone what has to do with the An family. The girl adds with special malice that there is no place in their family for such incompetent weaklings like him. But it seems that she is confusing something, because Ju-wen does not remember the moment when he managed to become part of their family. She's in too much of a hurry and jumping to conclusions. As soon as Jing disappears from his sight, he hears a ringing voice calling him from the side. As soon as he turns around, young Mr. Zhu puts his hand on his shoulder and nonchalantly informs him that he should not worry about the exam, because old man Yu stood up for him, so he can just follow Zhu everywhere, and the other 2 members of their team will get points. The young gentleman impressively gestures with his hand, accompanying his messages, and adjusts his sunglasses. One of their partners, the one with the long blonde hair, assures him not to worry. There is no one outstanding in guide, so even if he is alone, he will be able to take the first place without much difficulty. The guy next to him, more serious looking, confirms his words. They will do their best, so there will be no mistakes. This is good, because Ju-wen won't have to waste his strength. But it seems Lai Zu-an isn't even going to formally introduce them to him. They are probably just tools for him. He thinks about it until the loud voice of one of the organizers announces the imminent start of the exam. They are asked to approach the inspector-examiner of their group. The dark-haired girl takes Josie by the hand and says that she needs to get ready as soon as possible. Rushing to get ready, she manages to spot Ju-wen in the crowd. The young man smiles at her, and in his smile she sees all the words of support that he could say to her if they had free time. Josie smiles back at him, mentally wishing him luck. One of the examiners appears from the Azure Storm. He explains to the students the whole essence of the exam. They have to collect crystals that will fall to them if they defeat the skeleton soldiers. The final score will directly depend on their number. The man finally raises his clenched fist up and encouragingly wishes everyone good luck. When students enter the old city of Guide, they are enveloped in a black fog with occasional flashes of blue lightning. But even through all this darkness, in the distance from them, you can see a bright portal from where someone is coming out. When Ju-wen realizes who it is, fear completely overcomes him for a moment. One by one, the skeleton soldiers come out of the otherworldly dimension. They make frightening sounds, heading straight towards the students. All of them take combat positions, ready at any moment to prevent an attack, while that short, smiling, sandy-haired guy, along with the second one, go towards the skeleton soldiers. They skillfully scatter them to the sides, clearing the way. Ju-wen makes sure for the last time that he has nothing to worry about, since these two are really able to get points for their entire team, so he hurries to check his guess. He activates the phone, intently waiting for the game to load while Lai Zu-an looks at him. He is amazed that even at such a moment the guy does not part with his phone. He begins to think that there is nothing special about this guy. Ju-wen does not notice the gaze on himself, because he is completely immersed in the game. Not only the gates of the old city, but also the location of all the buildings here are completely similar to the dungeon in the game. Is it possible that all the dungeons from the game have their own prototype in real life? Ju-wen remembers the skeleton rider from the game, which is also in the dungeon where they are now, and his gaze anxiously freezes at one point. He looks at the phone screen, which looks like a map showing the area they have already explored, and judging by it, they are still far from the skeleton rider. If they don't leave the area reserved for exams, they will avoid a collision with him. As soon as he thinks about it, that smiling guy insists on moving deeper into the old city. As he reports, there are almost no skeletons left in this area, and the randomness of their attack has become much slower. If they expect to get the highest score, they need to go further. Ju-wen doubts this idea. He is in a hurry to inform Lai Zu-an that it can be very risky to go outside the territory, so he persuades them to refrain from doing so. Zu-an ponders over his words, thoughtfully rubbing his chin, and barely has time to agree, as the smiling guy sneers mockingly and calls on Ju-wen to tell directly if he was scared. He is capricious because of the possible omission of the first place. He tells Zu-an that there are absolutely no skeletal soldiers left here, so they need to leave here if they want to get the highest grade. Another guy reminds them that they have a complete plan of this territory, and with this a map of the division into separate sections. If they enter the buffer zone, nothing should happen. Zu-an grunts and agrees. He encourages Ju-wen, saying that there is nothing to be afraid of. In case of danger, these two will certainly figure it out. This is not good, because he cannot now directly tell them that a strong monster is waiting for them next, ready to do anything with them at any moment. He should try to beat him again with the phone, although it is unlikely that anything will come of it. In any case, if something suddenly goes wrong, he will just grab Lai Zu-an and run away. The smiling guy and the tall serious one clear the way for Lai Zu-an and Ju-wen coming from behind. The second one still continues to play the game on the phone. Ju-wen diligently taps his fingers on the screen, trying to defeat the skeleton rider, but everything turns out to be in vain. He loses again, although he deftly dodges and jumps away, but the skeleton rider still catches up with him. He was much stronger than the flying ant with silver wings. Ju-wen noticed that the skeleton rider could not maintain high agility all the time. He only increased his speed for a short moment to deliver his stabbing blow. This is probably the skill of his spiritual power. Ju-wen is horrified to realize that thanks to this technique, the skeleton rider will easily be able to defeat their entire team. He hears one of those two guys from their team exclaiming with delight because of a dropped spatial crystal from another skeleton soldier he defeated. The blonde guy grabs the red crystal and runs to Lai Zu-an to give it to him. Ju-wen informs him that they have already scored enough points, so they can go back. Excitement slips into his voice, and he runs his hand over his neck. That blonde-haired smiling guy hears his words and turns around, starting to resent his haste. He doesn't even have to do anything, then why is he in such a hurry to get back? The tall guy agrees with him and is sure that they need to fight at least a few more soldiers to be safe. Lai Zu-an takes off his sunglasses, squinting from the blinding sun, moves them on his head and looks at something in the phone. He tells the team members that there are no evil spatial creatures of legendary level registered anywhere nearby, so he thinks they can go even further. Ju-wen squeezes his wrist tightly, stopping him, because he knows that it can really be dangerous, since he never managed to defeat the skeleton rider in the game, and asks about his belief in the sixth sense. Zu-an asks again without much interest only because earlier Ju-wen said that it could be dangerous to go further. Why does he keep insisting on it? Ju-wen shares information about himself and says that since childhood, every time he was in danger, a painful feeling appeared inside him, and it has never failed him before, but now this feeling is very strong. He puts his palm on his chest and seriously asserts this. The blonde-haired man's indignation is once again heard from the side, and in an instant he finds himself opposite Ju-wen, poking him in the chest with his finger, almost in his face, lamenting that the young gentleman took him here so that he could regain his reputation, and that he would have to take full responsibility if for him, their team will go to the bottom. He sarcastically mumbles something about how it's just genius to involve some kind of sixth sense here, but Zhu Wen interrupts his tirade. His voice rises only by a tone, but even this is enough for the others to listen to him. He tries to explain to them that the guide area is quite small, so it is not unusual for one of the other students to venture beyond it. Along with this, they have brought so many points to their team that at the moment they can retain the advantage without any problems. That is why they can now fight within the area reserved for exams. There is no need for them to take risks and rush into unknown territory. Zhu's face shows understanding. He agrees with the idea that Zhu Wen's words really make sense, but he does not have time to say anything more, feeling a cut from the back. Jiang Hao is the tall and quiet guy of their team, injuring not only Mr. Lai, but also that short blonde guy. Zhu Wen looks over his shoulder with hatred, guessing everything. He directly asks Jiang Hao about who sent him to him. It's some kind of natural invulnerability. Jiang Hao also did not expect that the younger Zhu Wen, who loves pleasure so much with his whole existence, secretly practices just such a spiritual power skill. The cultivation method represents the basic principles of improvement, which were developed by the people themselves. This is what distinguishes it from the life force skills and spatial crystals obtained from spatial beings. Actually, that is why different cultivation methods are determined by different limits of perfection. Natural invulnerability is one of the rare techniques, thanks to which it is possible to immediately reach the epic class, skipping the mortal and legendary. Zhu Wen recalls that only non-defiled guys can follow this path, but Lai Zu-an does not look at all like a person who is able to make great efforts to improve such a skill. The blonde youth screams shrilly that Jiang Hao is a traitor. The guy can't believe he's helping Lai Mobai overthrow Mr. Lai Zu-an. Jiang Hao claims with complete indifference that he made his choice a long time ago. Lai Mobai still can't understand that Zhu Wen is not eager to fight him for power, but his brother still can't calm down. Zhu Wen barely manages to say this because of the injury, but Jiang Hao raises his hand for a new attack. He says that the young gentleman should not have pretended that he did not understand anything, and now he himself is aware of what is happening. Although Jiang Hao raised his hand for a new swing, but he does not direct it towards Lai Zu-an. A green splash sweeps past the young gentleman, and Zhu Wen and the blonde guy look dumbfounded at the big green snake. A blonde-haired young man with the last of his strength, as far as his injury allows him, shouts that this simply cannot be. How Jiang Hao, being a mere mortal, managed to get a legendary level pet. To do this, it is only necessary that someone who has already reached the legendary class voluntarily hand over their pet, despite the fact that it brings excruciating pain. Jiang Hao speaks venomously, admitting that Zhu Wen is really very smart, as his brother said, but this does not mean that he can be spared. This time he swings in order to launch an attack on Lai Zu-an, but the agitated confusion dissipates on his face when the young master fixes his sword in his hand. He strongly pushes it away for a long distance with the help of the power of his companion pet. Jiang Hao could not have imagined that the young master could also have a legendary level companion pet. It seems young Mr. Zhu has his own secrets. Zhu Wen emphasizes that he would never use such a terrible method to get what he wants. The young master's companion pet is a knight in dark armor, under which a red glow is visible. He is tall and looks quite formidable when Zhu Wen approaches Jiang Hao with him. He looks up at him for a brief moment before abruptly jumping up from the ground and running away. However, the young master will not leave it so easily. He won't let him escape, so he runs after him. Zhu Wen exclaims after them that Zhu Wen should not do this, because it is unknown where they may wander. He makes an attempt to catch up with them, but does not have time. The injured blonde guy behind him approaches and tells him to follow them immediately, but Zhu Wen tells him to go first. The young man finally shouts angrily that Zhu Wen is of no use. He considers Lai Zu-an's concern for him a waste of time. He doesn't understand that even if Zhu Wen goes after them now, he won't be able to help in any way. Unlike him, Lai Zu-an and Jiang Hao have top-level companion pets. However, they will all definitely be in trouble if they stumble upon that monster. Zhu Wen will only be able to help Zhu-an if he can find a way to defeat the skeleton general. He quickly takes his phone out of his pocket and activates the game. The skeleton general immediately appears in front of him with a couple of ordinary skeleton soldiers on both sides. Zhu Wen directs his character straight at him to try to attack, but judging by all the past failed battles, this general is very strong. Something is going wrong because he has become too invulnerable. His character loses coordination and the monster catches up with him because Zhu and Jiang Hao have already encountered him in reality. There really is no choice, he will have to go after them. During the battle now, he noticed that there was a blind spot next to the skeleton general's horse, where it was possible to launch an attack. Maybe Zhu Wen will have a tiny chance of winning if he takes this opportunity. Zhu Wen walks among the ruins of the old city of Guide. These are probably traces of their battle, which means they are very close. Through the clouds of fog, he manages to make out Zhu and the blonde guy in the distance. The second one also notices him and asks why he didn't come for so long. Zhu Wen ignores the questions and asks if they are okay. Only now does he notice the skeleton rider. It is radically different from its game prototype. In the game, its outlines are smoothed out, when in real life they are sharper in appearance. Strangely enough, he doesn't attack Zhang Hao behind him. Is it really because of the properties of the armor on it? This armor looks like another companion pet from the legendary level, but how did Zhang Hao have so much money to purchase it? Still, being rich is pretty good. It seems that Mr. Zhu's brother really wants him to fall among the ruins of the old city of Guide. The skeleton rider calls to get rid of violators who dared to cross the border of the territory of the ancient city, and, without waiting, begins to attack first. Lai Zu-an warns everyone to step back immediately when he reflects the rider's reception with his large shield. Zhu Wen manages to take cover in time, and he looks with horror in his eyes as the blonde guy from their team was swept away by the wave. He groans, but finds the strength to assure that he is alright, and tells Zhu Wen not to delay and help young Mr. Zhu. At this time, Zhang Hao releases his companion pet, and a huge dark snake flies towards Mr. Zhu. Zhang Hao taunts him, thinking that Zhu won't last alone against him and the skeleton rider. A new roll of green flash after another attack from the enraged Zhang Hao forces Lai Zu-an's armor to crack in some places. Zhu Wen thinks that if the young master just keeps taking all the attacks, he really won't last long. He decides to help detain the monster for as long as it will be necessary for Lai Zu and to deal with Zhang Hao. Zhang Hao is on the verge of laughing with such boldness of a mere mortal. He can't believe that a simple man wants to face off with the skeleton general, because this is a direct path to self-destruction. Zhu Wen confidently looks while taking off his vest, and nods affirmatively to Zhu and aside about being ready to attack. Zhu Wen carefully approaches the skeleton rider from behind in order to draw his attention to himself the next moment. He beckons him with his finger to himself with the utmost confidence. Up close, this monster looks even larger than from the outside, so Zhu Wen looks as tiny and helpless as possible against his background. However, this is not the case. Now Zhu Wen can feel the passage of the game for himself. When the rider starts to attack, he easily dodges it. It turns out that it's even much easier than in the game, and almost no different from it. The rider's big horse would have barely crushed him with its hoof right now if he hadn't recovered from his thoughts in time and sharply dodged to the side. Despite the similarity of the game and their battles now in real life, in the game the attacks of the skeleton rider are formulaic and predictable, while the real general is more agile and thoughtful. Zhu Wen manages to circle the rider and get under him to attack his horse, since in her absence he will become more vulnerable. But not a scratch remains on her. He begins to doubt whether the skeleton general has weaknesses. The blonde member of their team does not easily get to his feet and is sincerely amazed at Zhu Wen's strength. He managed to detain the rider, albeit briefly, but without the help of a companion pet. This is amazing and seems truly impossible. Even Zhang Hao gets distracted and looks towards the rider and Zhu Wen, and Lai Zu-an takes the opportunity to fully attack him. Despite his attempts, this does not affect Zhang Hao in any way. He only rises to his feet again without any problems and provokes Zhu into new attacks. The young master definitely can't stand to fight against the two of them, so he can't give up now and let them win. He has to smash this strange armor on Zhang Hao. Zhang Hao calls on his companion pet again to gain time, and Lai Zu-an is distracted by a giant scaly snake, grinning at Zhang Hao's attempt to seize the leading position in this fight. Even if he had confused Zhu-an for a while, it was enough for him to get rid of Zhu Wen. The rider and Zhang Hao simultaneously head in his direction to complete their plan, but Zhu Wen manages to deftly dodge their joint attack. He had long seen Zhang Hao's weak spot, but only now had he managed to get closer to him, so he pulls his arm back to smash the armor on his shoulder the next moment. Before he is carried away, Zhang Hao looks in amazement at the glove on his right hand, which symbolizes his companion pet, and cannot believe that a mere mortal can have a pet. As soon as the armor on Zhang Hao's shoulder is destroyed, his mighty snake turns into a small gecko, and now he is placed on one of the destroyed tiles around. Lai Zu-an steps on him and he squeaks loudly. Now the skeleton rider is even more angry. He starts attacking them with extremely high speed, and Lai Zu-an covers Zhu Wen with himself, being protected by his armor. He quickly tells him that he will start distracting the skeleton general so that Zhu Wen has the opportunity to strike a decisive blow. They run at him while the rider is waiting for them on the spot, and Zu-an rushes from side to side, performing distracting maneuvers. Ju-wen, taking advantage of this, gets as close as possible to the rider and delivers the last strongest attack. Clouds of smoke emanate from him, but the next moment the general is seen from the thick fog. There's not a scratch on it. They attacked it so many times, but not a crack appeared on it. Ju-wen freezes, realizing that there is an important detail on the rider, which they did not pay attention to from the very beginning. Judging by Zu-an's affirmative nod, he also understood this. Perhaps the crack in the skull of the skeleton general looks ordinary, but something tells Ju-wen that it may now be the beginning of the end of this fight. Young Master Lai's armor is starting to disappear from him, but they still have time to finish. He and Ju-wen surround the rider to launch a joint attack. Ju-wen still manages to hit right on the crack, so he cracks into small pieces with a crash. As the rider disappears, the dust settles on the concrete of the ancient city, and only a large, amber-colored crystal remains lying on a pile of gray dust. Ju-wen examines the stone with the red flame pattern with extreme delight and attentiveness until Lai Zu-an approaches him. He is right when he calls this glowing stone an egg with a companion pet. It is a great luck to get such an object. When Zu-an, impressively throwing his hands behind his head while the armor of his companion pet on him finally dissipates, leaves, Ju-wen asks him if he needs a companion pet of the skeleton rider. He allows Ju-wen to keep it as a thank you. If it wasn't for Ju-wen, then young Master Lai and Mayan too, that guy with the blonde hair, would have fallen here long ago. Mr. Zu talks about this while pulling on his jacket. His pet's armor completely left him without clothes. Ju-wen says words of gratitude and replies that he will gladly take a companion pet left over from the skeleton rider. Zu-an finally warns him that as long as Ju-wen is a mere mortal, he will not be able to hatch a legendary level egg. He definitely shouldn't take it irresponsibly. The young gentleman draws attention to his burgundy glove, from which fiery waves still emanate, and wonders where Ju-wen can have a companion pet. He himself somehow, thanks to his natural vulnerability, can control his knight in black armor. Then how did Ju-wen manage to get his pet? Ju-wen hastens to assure him that this pet belongs to the mortal class, and Zu-an looks at him for a long time until one thought visits him. Most often, creatures of the legendary level are much stronger than creatures belonging to a mortal. The weaker the unearthly creature turns out to be, the more difficult it is for him to form his egg. All this means that eggs with companions from the mortal level are much less common than the legendary one. Zu-an approaches his face, with envy and discontent concluding about his lucky luck. Ju-wen looks away and bumps into Jiang Hao's body. He is interested in what they will do now, but Zu-an picks at his ear and casually throws that he asked for it. He says he will take care of everything that happened here. Ju-wen thinks about it, but jerks away from his hand on her shoulder. The blue-haired man pats him encouragingly on the shoulder, convinces them that they have nothing to worry about right now. When they get out of here, Ju-wen can apply to any university without hesitation, according to Zu-an. He will personally make sure that he is accepted. They pick up Mayan too, carrying him on their shoulders, and finally leave the territory of the old city of Guide. It seems that they came out the very last, because there is no one next to one of the organizers. This is also evidenced by the sun almost setting below the horizon. Its golden light pleasantly settles on the face and warms a little after the coolness of the walls of the ancient city. Zu-an finally waves to Ju-wen until he gets into his personal jeep. Ju-wen, with the last of his strength left after today's exhausting exam, is holding on to the handle on the bus. Upon arrival, he shivers, getting off the bus into the cool evening air. Apparently, he developed anemia due to the loss of a large amount of energy. He thinks about whether goji berries and brown sugar will help him now. He heads home along an empty street lit by a couple of dim lanterns, and stumbles over someone's body. Ju-wen is very scared, but the man is still breathing. He lifts him up on a bench at the bus stop and asks if he's okay. An unknown man with long gray hair waves away with his palm, because nothing serious has happened. The old disease just reminded me of itself again. Ju-wen exhales with relief, and since everything is fine with the old man, he is about to leave, but he calls him. He believes that their meeting is a kind of will of fate, so they can talk a little. Ju-wen turns around and hurries to say that he is not very good at conversations, but the man insists on at least a short conversation. He wants to ask him a few questions and coughs. Something inside Ju-wen tells him to listen to the man. He looks up at him with his red eyes, and it takes a while before he asks the first question. Ju-wen's face stretches from the absurdity. He expected to hear a reasonable question, but the man just asks what size he likes breasts. Although this is an unusual question that can be heard in everyday life from a friend, he still, after a short thought, modestly answers that it is small. The man laughs loudly and repeats several times that he too. He says that only immature youngsters like women with a large size, while Zhu Wen thinks about the practicality of small breasts. It is much more convenient to maintain balance in battle with her than with a large one. Next, the man, who now seems extremely strange to the guy, after a short silence asks the following question. He asks about his preferences in the character of girls. The old man wonders if he likes gentle and affectionate girls or bold and sarcastic. At one point, Zhu Wen feels like the man is openly mocking him. But as for his question, he thinks about the answer to it much longer than for the first one. In his opinion, no sane guy will refuse a nice girl, deciding to give preference to ignorance. However, if he continues to say what this old man wants to hear now, then this pointless chatter won't end soon. How he now dreams of getting home as soon as possible, having a good wash, changing clothes for soft, comfortable pajamas, eating a hearty and tasty meal, not forgetting to play a game before a long, sound sleep. Finally, he replies that he prefers brash, sarcastic girls. The man is silent for a few seconds, lowering his head, and the guy thinks that the moment has finally come when he can go home. But, unfortunately, Zhu Wen looks at him with burning eyes and exclaims that he also likes such. He enthusiastically says something about the fact that there is nothing funny about cute and gentle girls. Women with a perky character are much more interested than they are. The man admits that he did not expect such a good taste for women from such a young guy. Zhu Wen rubs his hand over his face painfully, listening to all this. Involuntarily, he remembers Jing. She was by no means nice and friendly with him in their first and last meeting. Who in their right mind would voluntarily choose a girl like her at all? The man talks about his preferences again, calls him an outstanding person, until the young man offers to take him home. It seems that he does not listen to him at all, because he does not stop talking about his own for a second. He examines the guy from head to toe, grunts and notes that the man's body is the main factor that is necessary for the conquest of girls. According to him, Zhu Wen has so little vitality that even his good taste will not help in this case. To his surprise, the man seems to read his inner thoughts and says that he feels his nervous bitterness because of him, but turns to him for the last time. He holds out a small craft paper sheet and suggests perfecting the method of cultivating his spiritual power. He chuckles softly at his puzzled face. He says that he just needs to figure it out and guarantees that with this method he will be able to make any woman submissive. Zhu Wen thanks him, but hastens to refuse the offer without hesitation. However, the man says that the method of meditation through suffering that he uses for self-improvement is nothing compared to this. The Heavenly Demon Treatise does not belong to a first-class technique, but it is far superior to meditation through suffering. Zhu Wen stiffens at his words. How does this man know what method of improvement he uses? He looks skeptically at the exposed areas of his body once again. Zhu Wen has a small amount of vitality, but his body is strong in spirit. Such a result can be achieved by using meditation through suffering. However, if he continues to improve through this method, it will soon have a negative impact on him. The man strongly recommends taking it, because this method is 1,000 times better than his previous one. But Zhu Wen doubts. They had just met, since he could accept such a valuable gift from a stranger. It's hard to say what's on this man's mind. If he is not a fraudster, then he is really going to give such a valuable thing to the first person he meets. If this man has nothing more to say to him, then he will leave. With long strides, he hurries to get out of this ill-fated stop, where no one but him turned out to be at such a moment, and finally get home. But the old man is not going to back down. He rests his elbows on his knees and, in a low voice that immediately sends goosebumps, orders him to stop. Zhu Wen is not going to repeat his mistakes. More recently, succumbing to his inner sympathy, he agreed to a conversation with this man, which he soon regretted, so now he confidently continues to walk until his feet seem to stick to the asphalt. He can't move, and when they lift him into the air, he gets scared at all. Somehow, the man managed to move him from a short distance that he managed to walk back to the bus stop. The old man flashes his red eyes, which seem even brighter in the light of the moon, and with his words forces a chill to run along his spine. Everyone who had previously refused him, Jing Dao Zhang himself, did not leave him alive. Zhu Wen says this name several times, trying to remember where he could have heard it, because it sounds quite familiar. Awareness comes to him as quickly as he briefly examines a man. His name was definitely written in the history books. When the period of the greatest chaos reigned on Earth due to the interdimensional storm, the most cold-blooded and bloodthirsty man in all history was born. He represents a demon who has overcome 27 epic-class heroes one by one without remorse. The man wonders if Zhu Wen has changed his mind about his proposed method of improvement. He hears Zhu Wen's immediate loud exclamation and his agreement. The man knows that despite the fact that he agrees, inside his heart screams that he does not want to learn a demonic skill. Zhu Wen thinks that Tao Zian is full of nonsense. If he did master this skill, wouldn't the Commonwealth come to arrest him for having an affair with this demon king? The man gets up from the bench of the bus stop and buttons up his shirt, saying that he will not be able to train anyway if he gives him information about the method. He reaches into the inside pocket of his shirt and pulls out another paper parcel, only black. He offers him another method and asks if Zhu Wen will practice it. The young man looks away. All the doubt of his thoughts is visible in it, but the man puts a black bundle in his palm and squeezes his wrist. He makes sure that this time the guy will sensibly assess all the options for the outcome of events after the refusal, and will not reject the kindness of the old man this time. The man peacefully closes his eyes and puts his hands behind his back before leaving the bus stop. Zhu Wen exhales so relieved, as if he has just cleansed his soul. It becomes incredibly easy that now there is an inexplicable emptiness inside. Zhu Wen only hopes that the old man will not watch him from afar. He stands for some time in the middle of an empty bright street until he sneezes. Definitely need to go home first so as not to get sick. He runs past a man and a girl, accompanied by 3 guards, and briefly examines the badge of the Commonwealth employees on their uniforms. They check the accuracy of their location with one of the employees and head in the opposite direction from Zhu Wen. There is a high probability that they are now looking for Jing Dao Zian. In any case, it does not concern him. He finally finds himself in the walls of his native apartment. It feels like he hasn't been in it for several months, because at first glance it looks unusual. The first point of his pacification plan has been successfully completed, even after some time, but now at least he is at home, and not at a cold and damp stop. Besides, who knows what might have happened if he had stayed longer with that old demon. Those Commonwealth employees were probably looking for him to detain. Anyway, now he has enjoyed a warm shower and finally the meaning of the event of today's oversaturated day. He dries his hair with a towel, peering at his reflection in the mirror, analyzing everything. First, Lai Zu-an's brother tried to remove him, then he met with the legendary villain, who is now wanted by the Commonwealth. He just wants to play games in peace. The guy looks at the companion pet egg that fell out of the skeleton general, and at the black bundle with the method. It's hard to say whether this method is a blessing or a curse. He falls on the bed in his room and closes his eyes for a second, but falls asleep. My mind is dark, and my heart is pounding furiously, as if it tries to jump out of my chest. The guy seems to fall off a cliff into the abyss of a dark ravine to a crowd of reaching hands. These hands are black, as if they were swallowed up by darkness, with sharp curved claws. When he falls towards them, they all reach out to him, as if he is an anchor to grab onto to get out of there. But it is at this moment that Zhu Wen jumps up on the bed. He breathes heavily and bursts into the bathroom due to a feeling of approaching nausea. The guy is completely perplexed by what is happening. The black bundle with the method that the old demon gave him catches his eye. Blue hieroglyphs began to glow on it, meaning the lost Sutra of Immortality. Zhu Wen turns something like a black notebook in front of him, again examining it very carefully, but does not dare to open it. As it seems to him, there is nothing special about this black thing that could cause his sudden ill health. He washes his face to get sleepiness out of his eyes, because after that nightmare he never managed to fall asleep. Clarity of consciousness has returned to him, and the discomfort has almost disappeared, so he decides to play the game on that mysterious phone. He activates the phone and then waits a short time for the game to start, and then is surprised when he sees the skeleton general. It seems that the monsters from the game and in reality are not related to each other in any way. He considers it a great opportunity to try to beat him again. Active attacks and clever deviations from his techniques do not lead to anything new. The nasty skeleton general defeats him again. Zhu Wen falls on the bed, throwing the phone aside. The skeleton rider is much weaker in the game than in reality, but without the help of a knight in black armor alone, he will be able to defeat him only if he accurately calculates every move. It's depressing, but Zhu Wen tries not to dwell on these thoughts. In any case, he still has time to try to defeat him, since there are still a few days left before the announcement of the exam results. He thinks about his well-being and searches the internet for ways to prevent its deterioration at home. Everything turns out to be too complicated, so he decides to limit himself to a syrup of plain water and brown sugar. If he wants to spend days waiting for the results in the game, then he needs to go and buy food right now. He puts on the first beige pants he comes across, a simple loose t-shirt with an uncomplicated black pattern and a light jacket over it. In a convenience store near the house, he fills a basket with the same type of instant noodles and hurries to the checkout. These days pass in the same mode as those when he just found this phone and studied the game. Garbage has accumulated in the apartment again, and the guy himself leaves the bed only to brew noodles. He develops different strategies after each new unsuccessful one, until one day he finally manages to defeat the skeleton general. He gets an orange spatial crystal, which gives high speed and is upgraded to the 13th level. Despite this, his character's speed is reduced from 11 units to 9. He reflects on the fact that most likely 9 units is the limit for mortal class players who use meditation through suffering. Most likely, it will simply not be possible to reach the legendary class with her. Everything is exactly as Jing Daozian said. Compared to the method of natural invulnerability, the method of meditation through suffering does not stand next to it. He has nowhere to look for a new high-class method to improve through it, and he cannot use the one that the old demon gave him. Understanding dawns on him, and he sits down at the computer desk, and said that her father asked her to give him this flash drive. He inserts it into the computer unit, hoping that it has what he needs. The guy thinks that there might be something meaningful on the flash drive for self-improvement, but he starts laughing. How can his father, who is not interested in this topic, have something amazing? And when he sees a sign on the screen with shooting at the sun, he pinches himself hard on the cheek because he can't believe it, and the old fun is replaced by seriousness.